Chapter 13:11. I can't believe that woman is here as well. The ghostly fire in the silver skeleton's eye sockets kept jumping, and it opened its mouth as if it was taking a deep breath. Sure enough, even that crazy woman from God-vanishing mountain can't resist the wine that can help the great sage break through. The figure shrouded in black mist couldn't help but say. Empress Bailua walked over with large strides. Her bright red robe was constantly fluttering. The side of her robe was slit open, and her straight and beautiful legs were faintly discernible as the robe fluttered. She seemed to have seen the silver skeleton and the black mist hovering in the sky. The corners of King Biluo's mouth curved into a disdainful smile. The cave of the fallen gods and the Black Temple. It seems that the things Owner Bu has made this time are extraordinary. It seems that I have to ask Owner Bu for them as soon as possible. Bailuo's red lips parted slightly, and a thoughtful look came over her exquisite and beautiful face. Then, the corners of her mouth twitched, and she looked as if she could charm the world. Swaying her hips, she walked unhurriedly toward Forbidden Soul City. The silver skeleton snorted inwardly. This could be considered an open competition among the 3 forbidden lands, and it concerned their faces. Although the Cave of the Fallen Gods was not as prestigious as the God-vanishing mountain, they could not lose to the Black Temple no matter what. Rumble! A rumbling sound rang out. With that, the silver skeleton strode toward Forbidden Soul City. After it left, all the skeletons in the mountains sank into the ground. The experts of the Black Temple, on the other hand, laughed wickedly and also walked toward Forbidden Soul City. You had returned with Yu and the others. They, too, came back with a huge sum of money, each carrying 1,000,000 nether crystals. All they wanted was to have a taste of the restaurant's wine. When they returned, the front of the restaurant was already very lively. Yu, with little Hu in her arms, crossed the line and entered the restaurant. Bu Fong was sitting at the table. The jade jar was placed to the side, and on the table were many blue and white porcelain cups. The blue and white porcelain cups were filled with cups of wine. Under the illumination of the restaurant's lights, the colorful liquor seemed to reflect thousands of streams of light. It was as gorgeous as a rainbow and mesmerizing. When you returned with little Hu in her arms, Bu Fong's gaze fell on you. He nodded at you. You're back? Bu Fong asked faintly. Yu, who was carrying little Hu, nodded and narrowed her eyes. Then, she took out a bag of money and passed it to Bu Fong. Here are 1,000,000 nether crystals. Give me a glass of wine. You looked at Bu Fong and said seriously. Naturally, Bu Fong did not hesitate. He grabbed a glass of wine and passed it to you. The patriarchs standing in front of the table looked at each other in dismay. This cup of wine is really worth 1,000,000 nether crystals? They were still a little hesitant. After all, 1,000,000 nether crystals wasn't a small amount, and it was a huge burden for a family. After all, nether crystals weren't origin crystals. There was a world of difference between the two. This cup of wine was priceless. You took the wine glass that Bu Fong handed over. She pursed her red lips and couldn't wait any longer. Yu Ji, Luo Ji, and the other Earth prison overlords also stepped into the restaurant. For a moment, the restaurant became very lively. Yu Ji and the others rested their eyes on Nethery. Holding the blue and white porcelain wine cup, Yu pursed her lips and poured the wine into her mouth. If the great sage could break through after drinking this wine, what would the little saint have after drinking it? Many people were puzzled. If this wine could help the great sage break through, then wouldn't it help the little saint break through 3 or 4 levels? Many people had the same thought. If it really had such an effect, then it would be worth it even if it cost 1,000,000 nether crystals. If it could really help the little saint break through 3 or 4 levels, the whole Earth prison would go crazy. Gulp, gulp. You held the wine glass and drained it in one gulp. Her gray-green hair cascaded down. Her eyes narrowed, and her smooth atoms apple-bobbed. She gulped down a cup of wine. Yu's whole face was wrinkled, and her mouth was open. Apparently, she was stung by the spiciness of the top-grade Acheron wine. It's so spicy. Nethery wrinkled her nose and said. Little Who reached out his little hand, grabbed Yu's glass, and sniffed it. As soon as he did, Little Who's eyes lit up. He stuck out his tongue, licked the wine in the glass, and sucked the remaining wine into his stomach. Boom! Everyone was paying attention to Yu's appearance. Their eyes were wide as they watched curiously. They didn't know what would happen to Yu after drinking the wine. Would she break through? Would she break through several levels? After drinking the wine, Nethery's pale face turned red all of a sudden. She opened her mouth, and her little tongue moved, exhaling hot air. After licking the wine, Little Who was also bewildered. He leaned on Yu's shoulder, his face red and drunk. Yu's body staggered, and she seemed a little unstable. It was as if she was about to fall. The corner of Bu Fang's mouth twitched. He was prepared. He held Yu's waist, and the latter's face turned completely red. She opened her mouth, and the smell of wine came out. It's delicious. Yu narrowed her eyes. After Bu Fang held her waist, her head couldn't help but shake. Then, with a swoosh, her head bumped against Bu Fang's head. Her forehead hit Bu Fang's forehead. The corner of Bu Fang's mouth twitched again. He knew that when Yu was drunk, it would be hard to please her. Little Who was lying on Yu's shoulder, couldn't stand still. It seemed as if he was about to slip. Bu Fang reached out to pick him up and put him on his shoulder. He rubbed Little Who's warm head. Bu Fang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After his head was hit a few times, Bu Fang couldn't stand it anymore. When people were drunk, they would either say drunken things or pat the bed. Yu, why do you like to bump your head when you're drunk? Xiao Bai. Bu Fang shouted. In the kitchen, Xiao Bai lifted the curtain and walked out. His mechanical eyes flashed. Watch the wine. I'll be back soon. Bu Fang said. Then, he pulled Yu, threw Little Who on his shoulder, and walked to the second floor. Yu took the opportunity to hit him with her head again. However, Bu Fang raised his hand and stopped it with his palm. He raised his hand and patted Yu's red face. Bu Fang felt helpless. Sure enough, not everyone was like him when they got drunk, having such a good alcohol tolerance. Buzz, all of a sudden Bu Fang paused, his eyes narrowing. Yu Qi and the others, as well as the heads of many aristocratic families, all looked over. When you drank wine, other than acting crazy, she would naturally break through. Of course, everyone was paying attention to this breakthrough. Boom! Sure enough, Yu's aura began to rise rapidly. This trend was undoubtedly the trend of breaking through. However, it was beyond everyone's expectations. This trend only lasted for a while before it stopped. In the end, it only broke through one level. It caused Yu's cultivation to reach the second job, Little Saint. Although the side effects of using the cursed snake were great, Yu's cultivation base improved a lot. Moreover, the cursed snake had been secretly strengthening her cultivation base. Now, after drinking a cup of wine, her cultivation base broke through one level. Only one level? The little saint can only break through one level after drinking the wine? Is it because he drank fake wine? The heads of the aristocratic families were all stunned. They couldn't help but frown and ask doubtfully. However, it was obvious that Bu Fang's wine was not fake, which meant that this wine could also help the little saint break through one level. In other words, this wine would definitely help the drinker break through one level. The effect was already heaven-defying. However, many people still felt a little regretful, especially the little saint. If it could only help him break through one level, then 1,000,000 nether crystals for a cup of wine was not worth it. A cultivation resource worth 1,000,000 nether crystals was enough for several little saints to cultivate for several years. However, for the great sage or the 9-revolution little saint, this wine was a divine wine. If the 9-revolution little saint drank this wine, he might be able to break through to the great sage's realm. For the entire Earth prison, there would be many new great sages. So, this wine still had its benefits. You had broken through. Bu Fang's face became even more serious. In the distance, carrying a heavy sword on her back, Yuji looked at you with a pale face. A green light suddenly surged out of Yu's body, and the cold appearance of the cursed snake was faintly discernible. A pair of cold eyes locked on Bufang. After a long time, the emerald light finally dissipated. The cursed snake, Bufang narrowed his eyes. He had a headache, wondering how to solve the curse on Yu. Pulling Yu, Bufang went to the second floor and opened the door to Yu's room. He put Yu on the bed. Then, he took little Hu off his shoulder and put him next to Yu's head. Just like that, the girl and the fox fell asleep. Bufang closed the door, walked out, and returned to the restaurant. At the same time, the news that the supreme-grade Acheron helplessness wine could only help the little saint break through one level spread out. The heads of the aristocratic families in the queue looked at each other in dismay. Many aristocratic families didn't line up anymore and left. They came here for the wine. For the wine's effect of breaking through. If it could help the great sage break through one level, they thought it could help the little saint break through at least 3 or 4 levels. But now, it seemed that this wine wasn't as magical as the legend said. Bufang was very calm. He looked at the restaurant, which used to be crowded, but now, the people in the queue had left, their faces expressionless. He had guessed that this would happen. Those people were just trying to take advantage of the opportunity. They wanted to use the wine to break through many levels. But how could there be such an easy thing in this world? Although the supreme-grade Acheron helplessness wine was magical, breaking through 3 or 4 levels wasn't a good thing for cultivators. On the contrary, Bufang thought that breaking through one level was good. Although it was just one level, the effect of the supreme-grade Acheron helplessness wine could help them cleanse their bodies and build a good foundation. The foundation was the key. Looking at the departing figures, Bufang's face didn't change. Yuji and the others looked at Bufang with admiration in their eyes. He could be so calm in the face of such ups and downs. They also spent money to buy a glass of wine. The wine wasn't allowed to be taken out of the restaurant, so they drank it in the restaurant. After drinking a glass of wine, they were all drunk. Jin Jiao blushed, patting his chest and shouting non-stop. Luo Ji giggled unceasingly. Even the prison overlord, who was usually so dignified, would act like a clown when he was drunk. Even Yuji, who was always serious, couldn't help but laugh. After drinking the wine, she picked up her big sword and swung it around the restaurant. Bufang rubbed his glabella. He asked Xiao Bai to send them out one by one. Although the aristocratic families were disappointed, many of them had left. They thought that the wine wasn't worth 1 million nether crystals. However, many aristocratic families stayed. They bought the wine, drank it on the spot, and broke through on the spot. Then, when they were drunk, they were asked to leave by Xiao Bai. Since they were drunk, Bufang didn't judge them as troublemakers. Otherwise, the clothes-stripping crazy demon would appear again. Hades' era floated in. As soon as he entered the door, he let out a bell-like laugh. Ha 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 ha. Bufang, young man. Your wine is excellent. You're worthy of being the man I value. Hades' era strode forward, laughing as he walked. To Hades' era, Bufang remembered the truth that this fellow had told him when he was drunk yesterday. Instantly, he sneered, "Hi?" The corners of Bufang's mouth rose. Hades' era's laughter came to an abrupt stop, and he felt a chill. What was going on? Hades' era didn't know what was going on. Give I another glass of wine. Hades' era grinned. If he could break through by drinking, what was the point of cultivating? A glass of wine a day. In a few days, he would surpass his father. And some spicy strips, Hades' era said. He had finished his spicy strip. Spicy strips? No. Bufang glanced at Hades' era and passed him the wine. Spicy strips? No way. Who did he say was high? How come you don't have any spicy strips? Impossible. I saw you had some yesterday. Hades' era's eyes widened, and he didn't believe it. Oh, you young man, naughty. Give me some spicy strip. I don't lack money. Hades' era smiled mischievously. He took out a money pouch and waved it in front of Bufang. Bufang's mouth twitched coldly. I'm high. I don't have any spicy strips. Spicy strips don't exist. Not in this life, Bufang said. Hades' era was shocked when he heard this. How did Bufang young man know the term, high? What happened? Oh my God, could it be that he did something bad after drinking the day before yesterday? He was so drunk that he couldn't remember anything. However, looking at Bufang's emotionless face, Hades' era stopped courting death. Holding the wine cup, he walked to the side. He gulped down the wine. He squinted, rubbing his chin. He wanted to feel the thrill of breaking through. However, after waiting for a long time, he felt dizzy. Breaking through didn't happen, what? Hades' era was stunned. Could it be that this wine could only help him break through after drinking it for the first time? What kind of trick was this? The crisp sound of footsteps rang out. Outside the door, a fragrant wind blew. Oh, it smells so good. Owner Boo. Long time no see. What kind of good stuff have you researched? A soft voice came from outside the door. Many aristocratic families who hadn't left yet were stunned. That peerless figure was so beautiful that it could take one's breath away. Empress Bai Luo stepped into the restaurant with a smile on her beautiful face. Chapter 13:12. A soft voice came from the other side of the door. Bufang and Hades' era couldn't help but be bewildered. A whiff of fragrance wafted over. Bufang saw a familiar figure. It was the Queen of Goddess City, Bai Luo. Why was King Biluo here? Shouldn't she be in Goddess City? King Biluo was clad in a bright red robe. Her long, fair legs could be vaguely seen through her red dress. Her eyelashes were long and narrow, and when they fluttered, they seemed to be able to seduce people's souls. Bufang looked at her, frowning, but didn't say anything. Owner Boo, did you do something again recently? Did you cause a commotion in the entire Earth prison? My lord personally ordered me to come and investigate. King Biluo narrowed her eyes, her beautiful face wearing a heart-stirring smile. However, Bufang's face was still expressionless. He raised his hand, pointing at Hades' era, who was covering his head with his hands, looking as if he had nothing left to live for. That fellow had just gulped down 1,000,000 nether crystals, but he didn't break through. Oh, my stupid little brother is here too. King Biluo looked at Hades' era in surprise. Of course, she could sense Hades' era's cultivation base. That oppressive pressure made Empress Bai Luo involuntarily suck in a breath of cold air. Because she found that Hades' era's aura had reached the Great Sage's realm. The Great Sage, Dad really has high hopes for this kid. King Biluo said enviously. What's wrong with him? King Biluo asked when she saw Hades' era's expression. Bufang coldly glanced at Hades' era. I just drank a cup of wine, Bufang said indifferently. Wine? King Biluo's eyes lit up. Her red lips curled up slightly. She took enchanting steps towards Bufang and stared at the wine on the table. The fragrant wine wafted out, causing her to be intoxicated. This wine. Is it the famous wine that can help the great sage break through? King Biluo said. Bufang nodded. King Biluo was instantly excited. Looks like this is what the Lord is looking for. Hell Lord Inglong and era broke through because of your bar. King Biluo touched her smooth and white chin and fell into deep thought. The appearance of this wine was indeed heaven-defying. Besides, judging from Hades' era's grief-stricken state, only the first glass of the wine would have an obvious effect. But even so, this was already heaven-defying. Could help the great sage break through. Just thinking about it made her extremely excited. Give me a glass. I'll bring it back to the Lord. King Biluo narrowed her eyes and said to Bufang with a smile. Bufang glanced at the woman, then raised his hand and pointed to the small wooden board at the door. 1 glass of wine for 1,000,000 nether crystals. Also, a friendly reminder, this restaurant doesn't accept takeout service. This wine can only be drunk in the restaurant. 1,000,000 nether crystals for 1 glass. When Empress Bai Luo heard this, she was immediately stunned. 1,000,000 nether crystals for one glass. This wine is too expensive. He's treating me like a pig. Moreover, I can't take it out. I can only drink it in the restaurant. How am I going to reply to the Lord? I have to bring the wine out to the Lord. Bufang, can't you make an exception? I'm the queen of Goddess City. King Biluo thought for a moment and said. She touched her purse. She couldn't even take out 100,000 nether crystals, let alone 1,000,000. Who would go out with so many nether crystals? She didn't know about this before. Rumble. The ground trembled. Then, a silver skeleton walked in through the door. King Biluo turned her head and gave the skeleton a sideways glance. It was an expert from the cave of the fallen gods. If you don't have money, don't try to buy wine. The skeleton's mouth opened and closed, and a mysterious voice came out of it. King Biluo's face turned cold in an instant. She had just forgotten to bring money. As the queen of Goddess City, how could she not have 1,000,000 nether crystals? Are you mocking me, skeleton? King Biluo narrowed her eyes and said coldly. The ghostly fire in the silver skeleton's eye sockets flickered. Then, with a flip of his withered palm, a money bag appeared in his hand. He threw it on the table with a thud. Little chef, give me a glass of wine. The silver skeleton said. A skeleton? The cave of the fallen gods. Bufang looked at the skeleton with a straight face, and he couldn't help but think of the skeleton in golden armor who wanted to kill him. The skeleton in golden armor even used the great sage's trick and threw a golden skeleton arm at him. He remembered all of this very clearly. Naturally, Bufang wouldn't be polite to someone who wanted to kill him. Although he was a guest, however, it was still up to Bufang to decide whether he would sell the dish or not. How does a skeleton drink wine? Bufang asked expressionlessly, looking at the silver skeleton. Rumble. The flames in the skeleton's eye sockets flickered, and it became irritable. It's none of your business how a skeleton drinks wine. All you need to do is sell it, the silver skeleton said coldly. His words seemed to be threatening Bufang. King Biluo, on the other hand, stood to one side with a faint smile. How a skeleton drank wine was a very serious question. I'm sorry, but I won't sell this wine to you, Bufang said indifferently, sitting in a chair. The silver skeleton was displeased, and the ghostly flames in its eye sockets seemed to burn everything. How dare you, little chef? The little chef is right. How can a skeleton like you drink wine after buying it? Can you even digest it? A cold voice rang out from outside the door. Then, a plume of black smoke flew over, surged into the void, and emerged in the restaurant. When the black smoke dissipated, a figure wrapped in black bandages was revealed. You from the Black Temple. Do you want to fight? The silver skeleton said coldly. It raised its hand and clenched its fingers, making a cracking sound. Tisk, tsk, tsk. Are you angry? I'm not here to chat with a skeleton like you. Boss, give me a glass of wine. The figure wrapped in bandages said to Bufang in a hoarse voice. Interesting. The Black Temple and the Cave of the Fallen Gods had sent people here. Bufang narrowed his eyes. Then, he crossed his arms over his chest and sat down in a chair. You want to buy wine too? Bufang asked. The expert of the Black Temple nodded. I'm not a skeleton. I'm neither good-looking nor useless. I can drink. I'm sorry, but you're useless. I won't sell this wine to you, Bufang said coldly. Why? The Black Temple expert's expression changed dramatically. Why? The person who tried to assassinate me in Nether Prison was from the Black Temple, wasn't he? Bufang said, looking at the expert wrapped in bandages like a mummy. The Black Temple expert's face froze. Sure enough, Bufang still remembered it. But that was normal. No one would forget it. After all, being assassinated was like walking on the edge of death. You must sell this wine today. I, the Black Temple Master, have said that you must bring the wine back, the Black Temple expert said coldly. His voice suddenly became cold. You don't want to live in fear of being assassinated every day from now on, do you? The Black Temple expert sneered. The silver skeleton couldn't help but chuckle when it saw this. Sure enough, the Black Temple is still so shameless and disgusting. After so many years, your method of threatening people hasn't changed. King Biluo narrowed her eyes and looked at the silver skeleton and the Black Temple expert with a faint smile. In the distance, Lord Go, lying under the path understanding tree, opened his sleepy eyes and glanced at the silver skeleton and the Black Temple expert. That glance, it made the silver skeleton and the Black Temple expert's hearts skip a beat. The rumor that Earth Prison Dog was guarding this little store was true. The Black Temple expert immediately restrained himself, not daring to act presumptuously. However, the way he looked at Bu Fong was much colder. He was being threatened. Bu Fong sat in a chair, his face expressionless. He didn't sell the wine, and he was being threatened. However, was Bu Fong someone who was afraid of being threatened? Owner Bu, I've helped you get rid of these two annoying fellows. Can you make an exception? King Biluo said with a chuckle. The Black Temple expert and the silver skeleton looked at her at the same time. Woman, what strength do you have to get rid of us? The Black Temple expert and the silver skeleton sneered almost at the same time. King Biluo shook her head. Then, she turned her head and looked at Hades' Era, who was upset in the distance. Brother, do me a favor, cried King Biluo. As soon as her voice rang out, Hades' Era was taken aback. He staggered to his feet, feeling a little dizzy. The supreme-grade Acheron of helplessness wine was very strong. Although it could no longer help him break through, it was still very strong. As soon as Hades got to his feet, he staggered and almost fell to the ground. King Biluo rubbed her forehead, speechless. Do you think a drunkard can help you get rid of us? The Black Temple expert and the silver skeleton sneered. Hades' Era was unhappy. Was he being looked down upon? However, before he could make a move, Bu Fong called out softly, Xiao Bai. In the kitchen, the curtain was lifted, and Xiao Bai appeared in a flash, standing behind Bu Fong. Throw these two fellows out, Bu Fong said. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed with blue light. Then, he strode toward the silver skeleton and the expert from the Black Temple. The Black Temple and the Cave of the Fallen Gods are on my blacklist. My dishes will not be sold for them. So, please go back, Bu Fong said expressionlessly. As soon as he finished speaking, the silver skeleton and the Black Temple expert immediately flew into a rage. They didn't expect that Bu Fong wouldn't give them any face. After all, they were in a forbidden land. How dare you? The Black Temple expert's scarlet eyes lit up. Then, he turned into a jet of black light and dashed toward Bu Fong, trying to catch Bu Fong first. Troublemaker! I'll strip you as an example to others. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed the moment the Black Temple expert moved. His body flashed in front of Bu Fong as if he had teleported. Facing the Black Temple expert, who was covered in bandages, he threw a fan-like punch. Boom! The two collided. The Black Temple expert took a step back and sucked in a cold breath in disbelief. How could this puppet be so strong? How could it block one of his attacks? A puppet comparable to the 9 Revolution Little Saint? Could it be the Nether Puppeteer clan's sacred Nether puppet? After Xiao Bai's rebirth, his fighting prowess had greatly improved. Moreover, after devouring the heavenly palace tribulation of the supreme-grade Acheron helplessness wine, his strength had further improved. Now, Xiao Bai's fighting prowess was even more terrifying. Boom! Xiao Bai's aura suddenly became violent. His fan-like palm slapped out. In an instant, he grabbed the Black Temple expert's head and pushed him out of the restaurant. The moment they rushed out, a fierce battle broke out. Xiao Bai pulled out his thunder knife. After going through the heavenly palace tribulation, the war god's stick had also evolved into a thunder knife, which was even more powerful. The battle broke out in an instant, attracting the attention of the entire Forbidden Soul City. However, the battle ended as quickly as it started. Strands of bandages fell from the sky and scattered all over the ground. The Black Temple expert, who was wrapped in bandages, fled in a panic in a black mist, his naked back faintly visible. The scene shocked everyone. They couldn't believe that the Black Temple expert was defeated so quickly. If it weren't for the black mist, he would have run away naked. Looking at Xiao Bai, who was flapping his metal wings and carrying the thunder knife in the sky, everyone was in awe. Bufang's eyes flashed. After returning, Xiao Bai was still as domineering as ever. Chapter 13:13. The Black Temple expert was defeated just like that? In Acheron's store, the female King Biluo blinked her beautiful eyes, her red lips slightly parted. She looked a little incredulous. Apparently, even she didn't expect that Bufang's puppet could be so strong. That guy from the Black Temple wasn't weak. He was one of the strongest 9 Revolution little saint. After all, he came from the Forbidden Land. Even she wasn't confident that she could strip him naked. And the result? The bandages on his body were peeled off by the puppet. However, she was also a little curious. Why did the puppet only remove the bandages? What kind of hobby was that? Xiao Bai came back. The metal wings on his back retracted, and he stuffed the metal saber back into his abdomen. The silver skeleton's eyes widened, and ghostly flames flickered in its eye sockets. That guy from the Black Temple wasn't weak, but he was stripped naked by the puppet. This was going to be a little difficult to deal with. Moreover, although the silver skeleton was just a skeleton, it wasn't stupid. It knew that it couldn't use force in this store. After all, there was a Earth prison dog lying in the store. Even if the Earth prison dog didn't attack them because of its identity, there was still Hades' era. Now, Hades' era also had the strength of the great sage. Naturally, it didn't dare to offend him. Therefore, the skeleton decided to turn around and leave. However, as soon as it turned around, its body froze. At some point, Nether King Ha had appeared in front of him. He raised his hand and gently flicked his finger on the skeleton's head. A huge force instantly burst out from the skeleton's head. The silver skeleton felt as if its head was about to explode. This was the power of the great sage. Although it was only a trace of his power, it wasn't something that a little saint could resist. Boom! The silver skeleton shot out like a cannonball, flying out of the restaurant and smashing hard on the ground outside, causing it to sink deeply. Rubble flew everywhere and bricks cracked. The silver skeleton crawled out of the ruins. Its body was full of cracks. It looked quite miserable. Get lost. Hades' era's voice echoed in the restaurant. After saying that, he let out a drunken burp. The silver skeleton immediately felt humiliated. It was an expert of the Cave of the Fallen Gods, yet it had been slapped out like this. This was not giving the Cave of the Fallen Gods any face. Are you trying to offend the Cave of the Fallen Gods? The silver skeleton opened and closed its mouth, making a strange sound. He was very unwilling. These people didn't know the terror of their forbidden area at all. Why are you still here? I really broke your bones. However, in response to his words, Hades' era's calm reply was the same. The silver skeleton's entire body was covered in cracks. It snorted and turned around to leave. This scene was seen by many people in front of the restaurant. Many people sucked in a breath of cold air. Those were 2-9 Revolution little saint. Furthermore, he was a little saint from the Forbidden Land. The Forbidden Land had always been a taboo to hell. Elder sister, what do you think of my finger flick just now? Hades' era's laughter rang out from the restaurant. King Biluo smiled faintly. The atmosphere was still very harmonious. The people of the Cave of the Fallen Gods and the Black Temple were driven out of the restaurant. For some reason, King Biluo was very happy. But soon, she could not bring herself to be happy. She had planned to bring wine back, but now she found that it seemed a little difficult to do so. Bufang didn't care about their old friendship at all. He was not flexible at all. Did she really have to let her master leave the God-vanishing mountain? The last time she left the mountain was when Hades' Tenzang attacked Nether Prison. She left that time and came back seriously injured. The Forbidden Land was a cursed land, and they were sealed by a supreme power. Even someone as strong as her would be punished if she left the Forbidden Land. Therefore, she could not let her master leave the Forbidden Land just for a glass of wine. Therefore, she still wanted to fight for her master. She tried to persuade him for a long time, but Bufang ruthlessly refused. Even King Biluo was a little angry. Of course, during this period, Hades' era interrupted several times, asking Bufang for spicy strip. However, Bufang gave him a cold look. He ruthlessly refused. This made Hades' era feel like he had nothing left to live for. He held his head and wailed. Bufang refused him many times. King Biluo was also a little angry. Soon, she pulled Hades' era out of the restaurant. Bufang did not say anything about it. Because the weakness of the wine had been exposed, both the great sage and the little saint could only improve their strength by one level. Therefore, fewer and fewer people came to buy wine. The noisy restaurant suddenly quieted down. Bufang was not annoyed. This was inevitable. After all, not everyone could spend 1,000,000 nether crystals on a glass of wine. After a long time, the sun was setting. Just as night was about to fall, King Biluo stepped back into the restaurant with enchanting steps. In her slender hand was a bag of money, which contained exactly 1,000,000 nether crystals. She put the bag of money on the table. Her red lips curled up slightly, her long eyelashes fluttered, and she snorted softly. 1,000,000 nether crystals. Owner Boo, give me a glass. King Biluo said. There was a hint of anger in her voice. Obviously, she was also a little dissatisfied with Bufang. However, this dissatisfaction was not very strong. After all, Bufang was just a businessman in her eyes, so it was normal for him to value profit. She somewhat admired Bufang for not being tempted by her beauty. Whoosh! Bufang naturally would not refuse money. The multicolored wine was poured into a blue and white porcelain cup. Bufang handed the cup to King Biluo, who took it with slender and fair fingers. Smelling the rich aroma of wine, she felt comfortable. Bufang put away the bag of money with a satisfied look on his face. He had to admit that although the supreme-grade acheron of helplessness was not easy to brew, it was really a good tool for him to make money. Dang Dang's income from the past few days was equivalent to the income of a few branches for several months. This feeling made Bufang very satisfied, although the turnover task seemed to be far away. However, Bufang believed that even if the turnover was as deep as the ocean, it would be filled one day. Of course, Bufang had also found a way to make a fortune. That was to make more high-level dishes, such as the supreme-grade acheron of helplessness. If he could make a few more servings, Bufang believed that he would be able to achieve a breakthrough very soon. Bufang was now a second-class little saint. If he could complete the turnover task, he might be able to directly reach the 9-class little saint level. The system's upgrade was so capricious. However, if he couldn't complete the turnover task, it would be very difficult for Bufang to improve his cultivation base. It would be much more difficult than for others. Of course, Bufang was not worried about this. King Biluo sat gracefully on a chair. One of his long legs was placed on top of the other, and the fair flesh on his calf was pressed into a beautiful arc. The hem of her long dress fluttered rapidly. She stared with a strange look at the small cup in her hand, which was pinched between her fingers like an orchid. This thumb-sized cup of wine was actually sold for 1,000,000 nether crystals. Even Empress Jadefall couldn't help but feel shocked. She suddenly realized that Bufang's ability to accumulate wealth was really strong. Whether it was the Fong Fong ice cream shop in Goddess City or the 1,000,000 nether crystals cup of wine in front of her, both showed Bufang's ability to accumulate wealth vividly. A cup of wine worth 1,000,000 nether crystals. Now I'm a little curious. King Biluo's beautiful eyes glanced at Bufang and smiled. Bufang stood behind the counter, wiping the cup in his hand with a clean white cloth. Lord Go was lying under the path understanding tree, looking a little bored. Now that his injuries were all healed, he didn't need to sleep so often. So, Lord Go opened his dog eyes and looked at King Biluo with interest. It's useless. Although this wine can help you break through a realm, it has no effect on breaking through the bottleneck of a major realm. After all, it's not as simple as accumulating energy to go from the little saint to the great sage. Lord Go looked at King Biluo, who seemed to be in high spirits, and couldn't help but say something to dissuade her. Bufang's movement of wiping the cup paused. He raised his eyebrows and gave Lord Go a puzzled look. Bufang didn't know the effect of this supreme-grade acheron of helplessness. He knew it could help the great sage and the little saint break through a realm, but it was useless for a great sage like Lord Go. But he didn't know if it was useful for the perfected little saint. It's useless? King Biluo glanced at Lord Go, pursed her red lips, and then poured the wine into her mouth. The wine entered her stomach. King Biluo's pretty face flushed. At that moment, she was peerless, so beautiful that people almost couldn't help but feel suffocated. Her face was bright red, like a tender apple that people couldn't help but want to take a bite. This woman was indeed a monster. It's unexpectedly delicious. King Biluo's eyes were bright, like the brightest star in the night sky. She stuck out her tongue, licking her red lips, and hot air spurted out of her nostrils. Her eyes were a little hazy. Boom. A moment later, powerful energy began to boil on her body. Is she going to break through? Bufang was bewildered. Didn't Lord Go say that this wine had no effect on the 9-revolution little saint? Looking at the boiling energy on that woman's body, as well as the energy ripples, his face became more and more strange. In the distance, Lord Go, that shouldn't be the case. As a dog who had tasted this wine, Lord Go knew very well that although the energy in this wine was powerful and could help the great sage little saint break through to the next realm, however, it was impossible to help the 9-revolution little saint break through the barrier and step into the great sage's realm. After all, the gap between the great sage and the little saint was like a chasm between heaven and earth. To step into the great sage, the little saint needed to form a small world and the will of the great path. Only then could he be called the great sage. There were only a few great sages in the entire earth prison. This woman could become the great sage just by drinking a cup of wine? Lord Go finally felt like he had been slapped in the face. Snorting, Lord Go tilted his head arrogantly. It was just a coincidence, Lord Go said. The female King Biluo's hair fluttered. Just like that, she sat in the restaurant in a daze. All of a sudden, a pillar of aura shot out of the restaurant and into the sky. God Vanishing Mountain, on the ice mountain, a peerlessly beautiful woman sat on a piece of ice that had not melted for 10,000 years. The cold wind blew, blowing her hair. Her pitch-black eyes suddenly moved as she looked towards the distant horizon. There, a pillar of energy was soaring into the sky. This is Biluo's aura. Is she about to break through? The woman muttered, her eyes brightening. She had asked Biluo to find the reasons why the great sage had broken through, but now, Biluo had broken through herself. Could it be the cave of the fallen gods and the Black Temple? At this moment they also sensed this aura. As the forbidden lands that had been contending for tens of thousands of years, they were naturally very familiar with the female King Biluo's aura. The Black Temple expert who had been stripped naked by Xiao Bai and the silver skeleton that had been shattered by Hades' Era's finger were in disbelief. They had just left, and that woman had broken through? Was she using a cheat? Or in other words, that wine was really so magical? Rumble. The female King Biluo's breakthrough was like a fuse, causing the 2 forbidden lands to boil. The supreme existences in the forbidden lands could not sit still. Rumble. Nether prison, sword demon clans land, in a squarish sword pool, majestic sword energy constantly flew, bombarding people's bodies. All of a sudden, a figure in the sword pool opened his eyes. In his eyes there seemed to be divine swords dimming. The Sword Demon clan was the force in charge of monitoring the Forbidden Land, God Vanishing Mountain. Now, an expert of God Vanishing Mountain had broken through to the Great Sage, which naturally attracted his attention. In fact, he already had 1,000 questions in his mind. In the past few days, there had been one great sage after another breaking through in Earth Prison. He dared not ignore this oddity. After all, Nether Prison had begun to plot something big, but at this critical moment there was such a change in Earth Prison. Naturally, he did not dare to take it lightly. Is Earth Prison on steroids? Didn't the Great Sage say he would break through together? And how many years has it been since Earth Prison had a perfected little saint? Is he going to break through to the Great Sage? Sword Demon Patriarch took a deep breath. There seemed to be sword energy fading in his eyes. At this critical moment, the appearance of a new Great Sage in Earth Prison was not good news for Nether Prison. At this moment, a sword talisman sped over from outside the valley. It fell into his hand. The sword talisman shattered, the news spread in an instant. When he saw the message in the sword talisman, the expression of Sword Demon Patriarch, who had been indifferent, finally changed. Is the operation finally about to begin? Sword Demon Patriarch took a deep breath. As he rose to his feet, water gushed out of him, and sword energy gushed out of him. Swoosh, as the water in the pool churned, Sword Demon Patriarch pulled out a green sword from it, his naked body exposed to the surroundings. My sword has long been thirsty. Chapter 13-14. Rumble. In the sky above Forbidden Soul City, a terrible pressure was gathering rapidly, and thunderbolts were gathering. Everyone subconsciously raised their heads, extremely shocked. Forbidden Soul City had been busy recently. Not only had it become famous in Earth Prison, but all kinds of experts had also gathered here. Now, it seemed that an expert was transcending a tribulation. A single look was enough to tell that the might of this thunder calamity was far from ordinary. Some people were not knowledgeable enough to know what it meant. However, some experts were knowledgeable enough to recognize what kind of lightning tribulation it was. It was because they recognized it that they gasped. This is the tribulation of the Great Sage. Who's breaking through to the Great Sage? Is it because of that wine? Can a 9-revolution Great Sage really break through to the Great Sage realm after drinking it? Many people were shocked. They didn't expect this result. From the little saint to the Great Sage, he needed to go through a qualitative change, which was to condense his own small world and condense the will of the great path for it. It was not just about the accumulation of energy. How could a cup of wine do that? However, no one had expected that it could really be done. It's the city lord of Goddess City. I saw her enter the restaurant with my own eyes. She's definitely making a breakthrough after drinking that wine. Could it be a coincidence? The city lord of Goddess City is already a perfected little saint. Whether it's a coincidence or not, if this wine can really help the 9-revolution little saint step into the Great Sage realm, it must be worth 1 million nether crystals. Everyone was boiling with excitement. At this moment, the aristocratic families who had left came back with millions of nether crystals. They all gathered in Forbidden Soul City to watch the Great Sage's tribulation. Empress Bailuo was sitting in the restaurant. Her face was flushed red. She was tender and alluring, extremely beautiful. After a long time, she glanced at Bufang, who was wiping his wine cup, with a complicated look in her eyes. Whether it was a coincidence or not, she was really going to step into the Great Sage realm today. Standing up from her seat, the female King Biluo suppressed the surging alcohol in her body. The alcohol was so strong that she almost fainted. However, she knew that she was in the middle of a breakthrough, so she could not get drunk. Thus, after bidding farewell to Bufang, she walked out of the restaurant. Bufang didn't mind. Rumble. As soon as King Biluo walked out of the restaurant, the whole Forbidden Soul City was in an uproar. The world seemed to have turned silent at this moment. terrifying fluctuations erupted and rumbling sounds resounded continuously. King Biluo officially began her tribulation. Transcending the great sage's tribulation that countless people yearned for even in their dreams. This tribulation lasted for an entire night. Midnight, when the first ray of sunlight appeared on the horizon. Only then did the lightning in the sky slowly disperse. It was as if purple chi had come from the east. King Biluo's proud body floated in the void. She narrowed her eyes as if she was recalling the terrifying power that she held in her body. A burst of laughter came from the sky. Hades' era came through the air, talking and laughing with King Biluo. Yinglong, leaning on a walking stick, also came through the air. He nodded at King Biluo. King Biluo was also old Hades' son, so Yinglong naturally showed her the respect she deserved. When he saw the peerless King Biluo, Yinglong was filled with emotion at the moment. He was worthy of being old Hades, even though he was a son of one night of fun. He was a dragon among men. Now, he had also reached the great sage realm and became one of Earth Prison's top forces. Unfortunately, King Biluo was from God Vanishing Mountain. Otherwise, as old Hades' son, she could rule Earth Prison with Hades' era to resist Nether Prison's upcoming attack. King Biluo smiled in the void. At that moment, everyone was in a trance. It was as if all the flowers in the world had quietly bloomed at this moment. What did she say to Hades' era? Then, she walked away in the air. Before leaving, she gave a deep look at Acheron's little store in Forbidden Soul City. Then, she turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the sky. She had returned to God Vanishing Mountain. She had to report this news to her master. In the sky, a figure strode over with a green jade jar in his hand. He was so happy that a smile almost bloomed on his face. This man was none other than great sage Acheron. The group of people descended and stepped into Acheron's little store. After chatting with Bufong for a while, they all left. Nether Prison, by now, Nether Prison had already made many moves. Many small worlds around Nether Prison had begun to unite with Nether Prison and turned into Great World. Except for a few small worlds that still refused to bow their heads, the rest had basically submitted to Nether Prison's pressure. On a vast plain, a dense army was gathering. Terrifying auras gathered together and soared into the sky. It was as if they wanted to change the color of the entire world. These armies came from the various clans of Nether Prison, and their faces were full of fanaticism. Rumble! Rumble! The great sage of the 9 clans flew over from the sky. They hovered in midair. A terrible aura spread, distorting heaven and earth. These great sages were like pillars of heaven and earth, each one of them towering between heaven and earth. The number of great sage experts in Nether Prison was much greater than in Earth Prison, mainly because Nether Prison was richer in resources. The sky was torn apart. 9 rifts floated in midair. This scene made the Nether Prison experts even more fanatical. Everyone's face was full of excitement. Patriarch! The great sages of Nether Prison all wore serious faces as they saluted the void. In the void, blurry figures emerged one after another. The great unification of the Netherworld must be carried out, and the surrounding small worlds must submit. Since it doesn't make sense, we'll use force. A profound voice resounded through the heavens like thunder. The West Little Buddhism realm, the Wandering Soul realm, the Abyss, the Heaven Chief realm, and Earth Prison. These small worlds that refuse to submit will all be conquered by force. The great Netherworld's progress is irreversible. This is the inevitable manifestation of the operation of the laws of heaven and earth. As soon as the voice rang out, the army down below was in an uproar. Shouts and shouts rose into the sky, shaking the firmament. The great sages also cupped their fists, their faces filled with fanaticism. It was time for Nether Prison to show its might. Rumble. Then, deafening noises reverberated in the sky. The supreme experts of the 9 clans gave their orders. They distributed tasks. Every clan accepted the order, and was led by the great sage to attack the small worlds that refused to submit. The terrible flames of the fire demon clan swept across heaven and earth, burning everything. Terrible shrieks rang through the air. Tens of thousands of fire demons turned into torrents of flame and rushed into the sky, flying toward the distant world. They took their orders and left. The Sword Demon Clan, the Nether Chef Clan, and many other clans followed their orders. They all had their own targets, which corresponded to the small worlds they needed to attack. Of course, the strength of each clan was different, so the small worlds they attacked were also different. The weaker small worlds would naturally send the weaker races over. Nether Prison's actions were targeted and purposeful. This operation had caused the entire Netherworld to undergo earth-shaking changes. However, the 9 clans of Nether Prison did not attack Earth Prison, mainly because Earth Prison's identity was unusual. Ordinary clans naturally could not break into Earth Prison. The war began. The Nether Prison's army shook the whole Netherworld. The small worlds that had submitted to Nether Prison were also forced to send their experts. The whole Netherworld was mobilized. They surrounded and attacked those small worlds that refused to submit. The Abyss, the great judge, watched with widened eyes as the palm suddenly slapped down from the sky. The judges he had formed were all turned into flesh demons by the slap and were completely killed. Under the siege of several great sage, the walls of Abyss City collapsed, and its defense completely collapsed. Abyss, which had just broken free from Nether Prison's shackles, once again chose to submit under the tyrannical power of Nether Prison. When the great sage of Nether Prison's Fire Demon Clan casually stuck the flag of the Fire Demon Clan on the ruins of Abyss City, the unwilling great judge and the city lord of Abyss City lowered their heads. In the Wandering Soul Realm, ghosts were flying in the cold, gloomy Wandering Soul Realm. However, outside the void, a huge savage beast stepped through the air, its hooves crushing heaven and earth, crushing the walls of the main city of the Wandering Soul Realm. Countless experts were turned into broken souls under its hoof. Trembling, the experts of the Wandering Soul Realm chose to submit. They watched as the flag of the Horn Demon Clan was stuck on the ruins of the main city. This scene kept happening in the small worlds around the Netherworld. Under the pressure of Nether Prison, the Winged Man Valley had long submitted to it. Countless experts had been sent to follow the Nether Prison's army into the small world. Although they could not illuminate the sky with their holy light, they could follow the Nether Prison's army and cast their holy light to every corner of the Netherworld. Before they knew it, the smoke of war had spread all over the Netherworld. Many people in the small worlds were in awe. Some second and third class small worlds obediently chose to submit to the mighty Nether Prison. A behemoth like Nether Prison was not something they could resist. Of course, some of the lesser worlds with some backbone would not submit so easily. In the West Little Buddhism realm, the sound of Buddhist chanting resounded through the world. The whole West Little Buddhism realm was enveloped by the Buddha's light, and a towering Buddha appeared. Under the palm of the Buddha, a Buddhist kingdom emerged. The great sage of the Beastmaster clan, who had attacked the realm, was seriously injured and forced to retreat. The army of the Beastmaster clan was also routed. The savage beasts they had summoned all turned into minced meat and scattered in the void. As a first-rate small world, the West Little Buddhism realm had its own dignity. In the Vajra realm, 2 naked experts, their bodies glowing with golden light, had transformed into golden bodies that were tens of thousands of feet tall. Their fists shook heaven and earth, knocking the divine chef of the Nether Chef clan out of the sky. Terrible roars shook heaven and earth. Some small worlds submitted, while others chose to resist. In short, a war of submission and resistance filled the entire Netherworld, and the smoke of war spread everywhere. In the Heaven Chief realm, in the Nether Prison barrier, the huge bronze gate slowly opened, emitting a deafening creaking sound. The branches of the Heaven Tree surged as if to lash heaven and earth, spreading out and enveloping the whole 5th floor of Heaven Chief realm. City Lord Mingqi and many other city lords were watching the battle from outside the 5th floor. Every single one of them had ashen faces, revealing a look of shock. They never thought that Nether Prison would be so crazy as to launch a terrible war. Behind the bronze gate, the sound of war drums rang out. Every sound seemed to be pounding on their hearts. The experts of the Heaven Chief realm kept quiet. However, the Heaven Chief realm was no longer the Heaven Chief realm that could be bullied by anyone. After a short period of development, the experts of the Heaven Chief realm had cultivated the blood energy that belonged to the Heaven Chief realm. Although this blood energy was insignificant in the face of real power, sharp sword energy tore through the sky. 2 great sages broke through the barrier behind the bronze door and came in. Their cold eyes swept across heaven and earth. Thousands of deafening battle cries rang out. The experts of the Nether Prison's Sword Demon clan rushed out of the barrier with crazy killing intent and faced the Heaven Chief realm. In the Heaven Chief realm, a withered hut suddenly exploded. A stream of light suddenly shot up into the sky from the exploded hut. His golden hair waved in the wind, and his deep eyes seemed to be bursting with light. Realm Lord Dit came out of seclusion. His naked body was shrouded in golden light, and his aura shook the heavens. The immortal tree coiled around him and wrapped around his body. In Realm Lord Dit's eyes, heaven and earth seemed to be vanishing. His cultivation base was rising, and he had broken through the barrier of the Little Saint realm and stepped into the level of the Great Sage. Of course, there was sadness in his eyes. Nether Prison's pressure made him feel a sense of crisis, so he chose to merge himself with the will of the great path of the Heaven Chief realm, which had just awakened. That made his strength step into the level of the Great Sage. But in this way, Realm Lord Dit had cut off his way to a higher level. His strength was fixed forever. However, in order to get the Heaven Chief realm through the coming crisis, he didn't regret it. Kitchen knives, black pots, spatulas, iron bowls, the god of cooking equipment that belonged to the Realm Lord floated around him. With one step, he rushed to the battlefield of the 5th floor of Heaven Chief realm. Nether Prison brats, your Realm Lord Dit is back. In Earth Prison, a sword light suddenly appeared in the void. It tore the void. An old man in a grey robe stepped out of the crack in the void. There seemed to be an illusory sword intent sweeping through this person's eyes. He raised his hand, and in his palm, there was a small grey sword spinning slowly. He was playing with it. The old man slowly raised his eyes and looked into the distance. The wine that can make the great sage break through. What a familiar feeling. Is this the inheritor of that man? No matter who it is, as long as they have something to do with that man, they must die. There should be no more information about that man in the netherworld. The grey-robed old man's voice was faint, but it sounded like thunder exploding in the void. God Vanishing Mountain. The white-robed woman narrowed her eyes, which were extremely sharp. In the cave of the fallen gods, the golden skeleton sat cross-legged, with blood-colored ghostly fire pulsing in its eye socket. In the black temple, the bandage fell down, and the sound of breathing could be heard. In Acheron's little store, great sage Acheron, who was chatting with Bufong, gave a soft cry of surprise and turned his head. Inglong, leaning on the hollow-eye staff, opened his cloudy eyes. Lord Go, lying under the Path Understanding tree, yawned. Nether Prison finally can't stand it anymore. Chapter 13-15. The grey-robed old man's appearance caused the expressions of all the experts in Earth Prison to change. Everyone couldn't help but furrow their brows in fear. Even Lord Dog let out a yawn to show that he took it seriously. However, Bufong didn't feel anything. He just felt that the mood of the crowd seemed to have changed slightly. Bufong had put away the supreme-grade Acheron of helplessness. As a few days passed, fewer and fewer people came to buy the wine. Basically, those who could afford the wine had already bought it, and the wine was only effective when one drank it for the first time. After that, it wouldn't have any significant effect. Therefore, no one would continue to spend 1,000,000 nether crystals to buy a cup of wine. It wasn't worth it. Moreover, even if they bought a cup of wine, all they could do was taste the wine. To taste the wine, they had to spend 1,000,000 nether crystals. Except for Hades' era, no one else could do it. Therefore, Bufang's restaurant gradually resumed its normal business in the past few days. Great Sage Acheron had been visiting Bufang's restaurant recently. It wasn't because he liked the atmosphere in the restaurant, but because he liked to hold the jade jar and caress it. When someone looked over, he would explain to them that the jade jar contained the cup of wine worth 1,000,000 nether crystals. At that moment, the eyes of those who were informed would show strong shock. A cup of wine worth 1,000,000 nether crystals could hold more than a dozen cups in this fist-sized jar. That was 10,000,000 nether crystals. Great Sage Acheron was naturally delighted by this kind of shock. He enjoyed the feeling of being shocked. Once someone was shocked, he would be overjoyed. At his realm, ordinary materials could no longer make him feel happy. What he wanted to do was to feel the joy of his spirit. Hades' era and the others rolled their eyes at him without hesitation. They didn't hide their disdain for this shameless guy's behavior. Without selling the wine, Bufang began to cook. After all, a restaurant was a restaurant, not a tavern. In addition to selling wine, his dishes were the main focus. Although the effect of his dishes was much worse than that of the supreme-grade Acheron of helplessness, they were still effective. Ting-a-ling! The curtain of the kitchen was lifted, and the bell rang. Bufang strode out of it, holding a piping hot dish in his hand. Thick smoke was rising from the dish. A rich fragrance spread out and enveloped the entire place. Everyone couldn't help but twitch their noses and sniff the fragrance. "It smells so good." Everyone's eyes lit up. Bufang placed the dish on the table. Lord Dog had already sprinted over. He placed his paws on the dining table and stuck out his tongue impatiently. This was Lord Dog's sweet and sour dragon ribs. Nethery had woken up. She had slept for 2 days after drinking, so she was starving. She was sitting with Foxy in her arms, gobbling down the dragon blood rice in a porcelain bowl. It seemed that the aroma of the food had stimulated the appetite of many people. Everyone ordered their dishes and began to eat and drink to their heart's content. The atmosphere in the restaurant was harmonious, completely different from the tense atmosphere in Earth Prison. However, after prison overlord Inglong finished his food, he bid farewell to Great Sage Acheron and the others. Then, he left the restaurant and flew away. As the prison overlord of Earth Prison and the expert in charge of order, he naturally couldn't sit back and watch the Great Sage invade. In the Black Temple, the gray-robed old man hovered outside the Black Temple. With his hands clasped behind his back, he looked indifferently at the Black Temple. Soon, a plume of black mist drifted out of the palace and drifted toward the gray-robed old man. "I didn't expect Sword Demon Patriarch to come in person. Forgive me for not going out to meet you." A hoarse voice rang out. The supreme existence in the Black Temple said to Sword Demon Patriarch with a smile. With a creak, the doors of the Black Temple opened. The gray-robed old man chuckled, and the sword energy around him seemed to boil. Then, following the footsteps of the expert in the Black Temple, the gray-robed old man stepped into the Black Temple, and his figure gradually disappeared. A rumble rang out. The door of the palace abruptly slammed shut with a deafening sound. Inside the Black Temple, the two peerless experts seemed to be discussing something. After one night, the doors of the Black Temple opened again. With his hands clasped behind his back, the gray-robed old man floated out, stepped on a sword light, and flew away in a flash. The Black Temple expert hovered in front of the door. There seemed to be streams of blood-colored light emerging in the black mist, and he seemed to be thinking. In the cave of the fallen gods, the golden skeleton sat cross-legged in front of the cave. Its body seemed to be blooming with dazzling golden light. The blood-colored ghostly fire in its eye sockets flickered as it looked at the distant sky. There, a majestic sword light suddenly appeared. In a flash, it appeared in the sky. Jean Lu, you should know why I'm here. The gray-robed old man stood with his hands clasped behind his back. The gray-robed old man stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Stepping on the sword light, he suddenly floated above the golden skeleton. The golden skeleton turned and slowly raised its head. The ghostly fire in its eyes flickered. The catastrophe of this era is coming again. If the netherworld doesn't become a great world soon, I'm afraid it will follow in your footsteps, and your so-called forbidden lands will be completely annihilated in the long river of history. The gray-robed old man said. The forbidden lands can help you survive the first catastrophe, but they can't help you resist the second. When the catastrophe comes again, you will die for real. The ghostly fire in the golden skeleton flickered, and a crackling sound rang out. It seemed to be sneering. Even that man couldn't resist the catastrophe. What right do you 9 traitors have to say that you can? The ghostly fire in the golden skeleton's eye sockets kept flickering. Obviously, it was very agitated. The gray-robed old man wasn't annoyed. He just smiled faintly. The next moment, a wisp of sword energy suddenly emerged in his hand. He gently swung it. That sword energy flew toward the golden skeleton. Jean Lu, it's not up to you to judge whether I'm a traitor or not. This saint is only asking you whether you want to live or not. The gray-robed old man hovered in the void, stepping on the sword light as he said calmly. The golden skeleton stretched out its golden bony palm. Instantly, that wisp of sword energy fell, twining around the golden bony palm. The golden skeleton's eyes instantly shrank. You touched that barrier? Seeing the golden skeleton's shock, the gray-robed old man was very satisfied. It's not me. It's us. All 9 of us have touched the barrier, and Di Ting even has half a foot in it. This is the reason why we are confident to resist this catastrophe. As long as the netherworld becomes a great world, we will be safe from this catastrophe, Di Ting said. The golden skeleton was silent. The ghostly fire flickered for a long time. Then, it opened its mouth. All right, I agree. A wise man submits to circumstances. Ha ha ha. The gray-robed old man instantly laughed. The sword light swept out, instantly flying out. God Vanishing Mountain. The gray-robed old man threw a wisp of sword energy in the sky. It directly slashed toward God Vanishing Mountain. In God Vanishing Mountain, a slender jade-like hand slapped out, scattering the wisp of sword energy. Don't look for me. I'm indifferent to life and death. Get lost, a cold voice rang out. Ice Saint, aren't you going to think about it? When your ice absolute palace was at its peak, it was a behemoth that looked down on the entire netherworld. Are you willing to let it be reduced to dust? The gray-robed old man said lightly. For a Hades Tenzang, it's not worth it. What I, Ice Saint, do has nothing to do with you. Get lost, said the peerless woman sitting cross-legged on the 10,000-year-old ice. Good, good, good. You will be destroyed for going against heaven. No one can stop the netherworld from merging with the great trend. Black Demon and Jean Lu have already yielded. Why are you still so stubborn? The gray-robed old man said coldly. He raised his hand, and instantly, countless wisps of sword energy vanished. Are you going to get lost or not? If you don't, I'll call the dog. Ice Saint's voice was as cold as ice. Her words made the gray-robed old man's expression change. Humph. You don't know what's good for you. That dog can't even protect himself. Just wait to die with him, the old man sneered. The next moment, he stepped on a sword light and disappeared. Ice Saint watched as the gray-robed old man disappeared. A look of disdain came over her cold face. A bunch of hypocrites. You hurt me, and now you dare to ask me for help. Who doesn't have a temper? As soon as she finished speaking, she took out an ice cream from behind her and slowly ate it. Outside Forbidden Soul City, the Acheron River suddenly churned. Terrible waves soared into the sky, and the blood-colored river flowed backward. A beam of sword light whizzed over, completely splitting the river into two. A gray-robed old man came walking over, his eyes flickering. Behind him, there were thousands of sword lights surging. Forbidden Soul City. A strange smile came over the gray-robed old man's face. Looking at the broken city wall, he immediately soared into the sky. He hovered in midair. With a flip of his hand, he slashed the sword down at the city below. As the sword fell, the oppressive void let out a cracking sound, as if it could not bear the heavy burden. Rumble! The huge sword fell from the sky. It smashed hard on Forbidden Soul City and devoured the whole city in an instant. The terrible sword light carried an extremely powerful aura of destruction. Under the sword light, the city collapsed. The city crumbled and the bricks were turned into dust. The entire majestic city had turned into ruins in an instant. Thousands of miles outside Forbidden Soul City, all the residents of Forbidden Soul City were watching this scene in horror. Fortunately, prison overlord Inglong had moved them away first. Otherwise, they would have been completely killed by the sword. Even a little saint of the perfected realm could not withstand it. The sword energy was too strong. It was as if a real sword god had descended to the world. The gray-robed old man put his hands behind his back and waved his sleeve. Terrible airwaves immediately blew out with a rumble. The smoke and dust that had turned into ruins dispersed. The gray-robed old man's eyes narrowed, and then they burst into thousands of rays of light. It's intact. The gray-robed old man took a deep breath. Looking at the intact restaurant in the ruins, his face turned cold. Rubble rolled down. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang walked to the door of the restaurant. Beside him, Yu stood quietly with Little Hu in her arms. The terrible sword had turned the whole Forbidden Soul City into ruins. Its power seemed to be able to destroy the world. It was too horrible. Bufang watched expressionlessly through the smoke and dust at the gray-robed old man standing in midair. In the restaurant, Great Sage Acheron came out with a jar of wine in his arms. Lord Go, on the other hand, also came to the door with his enchanting cat-like step. He looked up at the old man in midair. What's coming will come. These guys can't help it. Lord Go stuck out his tongue, and his gentle and magnetic voice rang out. Great Sage Acheron glanced at Lord Go with the wine jar in his arms and said, Mangy dog, this old fellow is here for you, isn't he? How dare he come to you alone? Alone? You think too much. These old fellows are very afraid of death. Lord Go shook his head, and his gentle and magnetic voice rang out. The next moment, with his enchanting cat-like steps, he soared into the sky. All of a sudden, he hovered in front of the gray-robed old man. However, to Lord Go's surprise, the gray-robed old man didn't pay attention to him. The gray-robed elder's gaze was not on him. Instead, he was staring at Bufang, who was standing in front of the restaurant. Lord Go tilted his head slightly. The next moment, he found that the gray-robed old man was bursting with endless killing intent, which rushed toward Bufang below. The immortal restaurant, the heaven-defying dishes, and the familiar aura alike too alike. You and that person are really too alike. It's because of the similarity that you must die. Chapter 13:16. Lord Go was not the only one who was dumbfounded by the strange source of the killing intent. Even Bufang, who was standing in front of the restaurant, was slightly taken aback. Looking at the gray-robed old man pointing his undisguised killing intent at him, Bufang couldn't help but furrow his brows. He had never seen this old man, and there shouldn't be any conflict between them. So why was the old man's killing intent so strong, and it was so strong that it could destroy heaven and earth? When did I provoke him? Great Sage Acheron gave Bufang a strange look with his wine jar in his arms. Maybe he's jealous of your handsomeness, Great Sage Acheron said hesitantly after thinking for a moment. He thought the Sword Demon Patriarch was here for Lord Go, but it turned out that the old fellow's target was Bufang. Regardless of whether it was him or Lord Dog, both of them were somewhat puzzled. Nonsense. If someone is jealous, it should be because of I's handsomeness. Bufang young man is just expressionless. Hades Era poked his head out of the restaurant and said seriously. He flipped his flowing bangs back and gave a charming smile. Rumble. In the sky, a terrible aura suddenly spread and swept across heaven and earth. In the distance, the people of Forbidden Soul City, who had been evacuated, couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. The aura was too terrifying. They couldn't believe that there was such an expert in Earth prison who dared to attack without scruples. Inglong's pupils constricted. Behind him were Gold Horn, Silver Horn, and the other prison overlords, who also had serious faces. The others might not recognize him, but as prison overlords, they naturally recognized the gray-robed old man. He was the patriarch of the Sword Demon clan of the 9 Nether Prison clans. Legend had it that he had long reached the realm of the 9 Revolution Great Sage. An existence like this, he was almost freakishly strong. However, even when Hades Tenzang attacked Earth Prison, the patriarch of the 9 Nether Prison clans had never come to Earth Prison. Why had he personally come to the Infernal Realm? Moreover, he was using unparalleled methods to destroy an entire city? Thinking of Nether Prison's recent tricks, the prison overlords' faces grew even more unsightly. Nether Prison can't wait any longer. They're finally going to make a move. As soon as the Netherworld's tournament of the Great Path is over, they will show their might and intimidate all the surrounding powers. The 9 old fellows from the 9 clans are going to form the Great Netherworld. Hell Overlord Inglong leaned on the hollow eye cane with a solemn expression. But is this old fellow looking down on my hell? You want to make the entire infernal realm submit by yourself? Inglong's expression was extremely unsightly. He suddenly smashed his walking stick down, causing it to smash into the ground, causing the ground to cave in deeply. Buzz as the exchange deepened. In the sky, the gray-robed old man finally made a move. His murderous intent toward Bufang had plunged the entire world into terror. A sword chime rang out. All of a sudden, a sword flew out from behind him. It shone with a dazzling light that dimmed the world at this moment. You must die. A soft whistle rang out. With a thought in his mind, the Sword Demon Patriarch's sword light blasted through everything and slashed down toward Bufang. Old sword, do you really think I, Lord Go, don't exist? A gentle and magnetic voice rang through the void. Lord Go sneered. His chubby body trembled, and the fats on his body seemed to be trembling. He raised his paw and threw it out. With a rumble, the paw collided with the sword light. It was like the most terrible collision between heaven and earth, and the whole world became extremely dim at this moment. A rumbling sound rang out incessantly, making everyone's eardrums roar. Blasts of air surged, and terrible energy fluctuations poured out in all directions. Earth Prison Dog. I'll kill you sooner or later. Those who act against the heavens will not have a good end. Tian Song was like that, and you will be like that too. The gray-robed old man stood in midair with his hands clasped behind his back. Streams of sword energy shot out of him like a lotus of swords, spreading out inch by inch with him as the center. He raised his fingers. Under his control, thousands of sword lights turned into a torrent of sword energy. The torrent roared like flowing water. Swoosh in the sky, it turned into a huge dragon of sword chi. The silver dragon of sword chi slashed straight down. Earth Prison's sky could not bear the burden and kept shattering. The void cracked open, revealing numerous void turbulent streams. The Great Sage's method was enough to destroy a part of the world. Lord Go's eyes turned scarlet in an instant. If you want to fight, come fight me in the starry sky. A dog barked, a terrible howl that seemed to be roaring at the heavens. Buzz, the sky changed color instantly. Lord Go thrust out his paw. The paw blotted out the sun as it tangled with the silver sword dragon and charged into the starry sky together. Above the sky and under the starry sky was the battlefield belonging to the great sage. The battle over, there was earth-shattering. "Well, I'll chop off your dog head, and then I'll kill this little animal that shouldn't exist." Sword Demon Patriarch gave Bufang a cold glance, which was full of murderous intent. The next moment, he soared into the sky and rushed into the battlefield of the stars. Lord Go's chubby body jiggled as he turned to look at Bufang. His gaze was deep and profound. "Take care of yourself, Lord Go." "I'll be back soon," Lord Go said. "Take care of yourself, Lord Go." Then, with graceful cat-like steps, he stepped into the battlefield of the stars. Before long, the people in the sky felt that the world seemed to dim. A terrible battle was breaking out. In Earth Prison, many savage beasts in the Acheron River Valley were prostrating on the ground, shivering and unable to move under the pressure of the great sage. Acheron's little restaurant, Forbidden Soul City, had been completely reduced to ruins, and the ground was littered with rubble. Only Acheron's little restaurant, protected by the system, was safe and sound. An invisible energy membrane kept swirling outside. Bufang stood in the restaurant. He was lost in thought. Sword Demon Patriarch's surging killing intent and his strange words made Bufang narrow his eyes slightly. After analyzing Sword Demon Patriarch's words, Great Sage Acheron and the others also felt that Bufang had obtained the inheritance of some extraordinary figure. That inheritance might have made the 9 old fellows of Nether Prison very afraid. After all, the Netherworld had existed for an unknown period of time. Many legendary figures had been born, so it was normal for them to leave behind inheritances. Even Great Sage Acheron, who had lived the longest among them, was lost in thought. However, no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure out whose inheritance Bufang had obtained was, and why it made Sword Demon Patriarch so afraid and filled with crazy killing intent. Suddenly, Great Sage Acheron's eyes lit up. Could it be the inheritance of a peerless expert from the last age? Great Sage Acheron thought to himself, but as soon as the idea came out, he was shocked. A supreme existence from the last age? That was a taboo existence. The end of an era and the birth of a new one was the illusory power of the law of time in the world. The laws and rules were profound mysteries above the will of the Great Path. Could it be that Bufang's inheritance was related to this mystery? Great Sage Acheron had lived for a long time, so he naturally knew a lot of things. For example, the Forbidden Lands of Earth Prison and the Forbidden Lands of Nether Prison were the survivors of the last era. They were surrounded by the power of the laws and rules. These forces bound them. Once they left the Forbidden Lands, they would be eroded by the power of the laws and rules, and their life force would rapidly decline. The weaker one's strength was, the smaller the influence. Once an expert like the Great Sage left the Forbidden Lands for too long, he would be severely injured and even turned into ashes. He would be completely obliterated by the power of the laws. If Bufang had really obtained the inheritance of a supreme existence from the last age, it would explain why he had become a thorn in the side of the 9 clans of Nether Prison. "You're really a lucky man to obtain that kind of inheritance," Great Sage Acheron said enviously as he looked at Bufang. Bufang listened to Great Sage Acheron's analysis, and his face became slightly strange. He knew better than anyone that he had obtained the inheritance of an expert from the last age. He just had the system, which helped him set foot on the path to becoming the god of cooking. Bufang rubbed his nose. However, Bufang thought more. The Sword Demon Patriarch's words made Bufang ponder. The immortal little restaurant, the magical dishes, these were all characteristics from the system. The information revealed in the old man's words made Bufang frown. He said he was very similar to a person. Did that person also have these characteristics? Could it be that there was someone else in the netherworld who was related to the system? Bufang was shocked, and he couldn't help but ask the system. However, no matter how he asked, the system did not respond. It was as if it had acquiesced. Could it be the previous host? Bufang fell into a state of shock. From the conversation of the artifact's spirits, Bufang knew about the existence of the previous host. But the previous host had fallen long ago. Otherwise, he wouldn't be who he was today. However, it never occurred to Bufang that the previous host was also related to the netherworld. Bufang rubbed his chin, feeling more and more shocked. Bufang! Suddenly, Yu's cold voice rang in his ears. It interrupted Bufang's thoughts. Bufang was slightly taken aback. He gave Nethery a puzzled look. With a serious look in her black eyes, Yu raised her hand and pointed into the distance. Bufang paused. He looked over. Crack, crack, with Acheron's restaurant as the center, the ground kept crumbling and sending dirt flying. Then, one white skeleton after another crawled out of the ground. The whole Forbidden Soul City, which had been reduced to ruins, seemed to have turned into a land of the dead at this moment. In front of the restaurant, Great Sage Acheron's eyes widened in surprise. The ground is full of skeletons. Did the guy from the Cave of the Fallen Gods make a move? Boom! A loud rumble rang out. The ground exploded. A huge shadow instantly weighed down on the whole scene, making everyone's aura tremble. A huge bone dragon rose from the ground. Kacha, in addition to the bone dragon, many crooked skeletons clad in bronze armor crawled out of the ground with bone spears in their hands. Their eyes flickered with ghostly fire as they fixed on Bufang in the restaurant. There's stirring up trouble. I can't believe Sword Demon Patriarch called those guys from the Forbidden Land to make a move. It looks like things are going to get tricky. Great Sage Acheron focused his eyes. Looking at the huge bone dragon that seemed to blot out the sky, he took a deep breath. Roar. It was a bone dragon. But when it opened its mouth, it let out a real dragon roar. This is a bone dragon transformed from the corpse of a true dragon. A true dragon from the last era. Great Sage Acheron's eyes grew serious as he felt a pressure. The bone dragon's aura was very terrifying. True dragons and divine phoenixes were all real divine beasts, each of whose strength had reached the peak of the Great Sage's level. They were all invincible divine beasts in the world. Even if they were corpses formed from death, they still had supreme power. Rumble. Monstrous ghostly fire burned. The blood-colored flames surged. A golden skeleton slowly stepped out of the blood-colored flames in the distance. Its terrible aura was monstrous. The ghostly fire in its eye sockets fixed on Bufang. The golden skeleton's murderous aura was monstrous. Jean Lu, are you crazy? Why aren't you staying in the Forbidden Land? Are you looking for death? Great Sage Acheron frowned and shouted, holding a wine jar in one hand. The golden skeleton glanced at Great Sage Acheron, then turned its head and fixed on Bufang, ignoring Acheron Great Sage. For a moment, the atmosphere became awkward. You die, Jean Lu said. Then, the ghostly fire flickered, and a powerful divine will surged out. In the sky, the bone dragon opened its mouth and roared, its voice deafening. Buzz white flames surged out of the bone dragon's mouth and shot toward Acheron's restaurant. The dragon's breath was about to completely destroy the restaurant. Chapter 13:17. Even if a true dragon had fallen, it still carried supreme dragon might. Although it was a dragon skeleton from the last era and could be considered an antique, the dragon might it exhaled was still destructive. The whole sky turned pale. Great Sage Acheron took a deep breath. He raised his hand and snapped his fingers. The next moment, the Acheron River rushed over and gathered in front of him. Soon, it turned into a blood-colored water dragon, which collided with the dragon's breath. A deafening sizzling sound rang out. The blood-colored Acheron River evaporated, filling the air with water vapor, and enveloping the ruins of Forbidden Soul City in a white mist. Bufang, my little friend, I'll be right back. Help me keep this wine jar for the time being. Great Sage Acheron said. Before Bufang could come to his senses, The jade jar flew into Bufong's hand and was caught by Bufong. Bufong held the fist-sized jade jar. Then, he heard great sage Acheron's wild laughter. I haven't exercised my muscles for 10,000 years. Today I'll play with a skeleton like you. His voice echoed through the air. Great sage Acheron stepped on the blood-colored Acheron River and soared into the sky. He pinched his index finger and thumb together, then bent it. Then, he put it in his mouth and let out a shrill cry. His voice lingered in the air. The next moment, Acheron Valley roar. A dragon's roar shook the heavens. Rumble. The ground seemed to shake violently, and terrible fluctuations set off heaven-shaking waves. Uluo's eyes widened as he looked at the crumbling ground behind him. A blood-colored illuminating dragon flapped its wings and flew out of the valley, opening its huge mouth to reveal its sharp teeth. A terrifying pressure spread out, causing the wings on Uluo's back to tremble. The huge blood-illuminating dragon soared into the sky and flew toward Forbidden Soul City in the distance. There, a huge white bone dragon roared into the sky. The blood-illuminating dragon flew over. Its huge body blotted out the sky. You have the bone dragon, I have the blood-illuminating dragon. Let's see if your true dragon bones can withstand the attacks of my blood-illuminating dragon. The great sage Acheron laughed heartily. The blood-illuminating dragon roared. As it flew over, a blood-colored dragon breath spread out from its mouth. With a loud bang, it charged over, pressing the giant bone dragon to the ground. The dragon claw smashed down fiercely. The battle between the bone dragon and the torch dragon instantly attracted the attention of thousands of experts. The true dragon skeletal dragon and the blood-illuminating dragon were both at the level of great sage. This battle caused a great commotion, and the ground seemed to be falling apart. It was extremely shocking. Courting death. The golden skeleton's mouth trembled, and mysterious syllables spread out. In the next moment the ground suddenly shattered. Like a golden cannonball, the golden skeleton shot up into the sky. Then, it charged toward the great sage Acheron in the sky. Boom! The skeleton's punch shook heaven and earth. The punch seemed to smash the sky, stirring up great waves. Skeleton! Let's enter the battlefield of the stars and fight. Let's have a good fight. Let me see how strong the survivors of the last era are. The great sage Acheron roared. The blood-colored Acheron water surged up. Wrapping around the body of the great sage Acheron, it rushed into the starry sky. Without saying a word, the golden skeleton stepped on the void. Its golden bones seemed to glow like raging flames as it chased after the great sage Acheron. As for the true dragon skeletal dragon and the blood-illuminating dragon, they also rushed into the void. In the starry sky, 3 more great sages were fighting. Dense water vapor lingered in the ruins of Forbidden Soul City. It enveloped the whole Acheron's little restaurant. Standing at the door, Bufong was lost in thought. You stood at Bufong's side, holding Little Hu in her arms and saying nothing. The battle happened too suddenly. However, it seemed that they were prepared. The attack from the Forbidden Land seemed to be arranged by the Sword Demon Patriarch. In the restaurant, Hades Era poked his head out and glanced at Bufong, who was lost in thought. Then, he grinned. Don't worry. If the 3 patriarchs of the 9 nether prison clans attacked at the same time, they might be able to cause some trouble for the mangy dog. But it's just the Sword Demon Patriarch. The mangy dog has nothing to fear, Hades Era said. Bufong looked up at him, but he didn't say anything. Crack, crack, crack. The ruins around the restaurant churned. One skeleton after another crawled out of it. With flames burning in their eyes, they all rushed toward Acheron's little restaurant. Hades Era glanced at the skeletons outside, and his eyes lit up in an instant. Bufong young man, 10 spicy strip. I'll help you clean up this rubbish. Nether King Erha grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. He finally had a way to earn spicy strips again. Since the day he called Bufong a stinky brat, Hades' era hadn't seen a single spicy strip. This really made him want to eat it. Now, in his eyes, the skeletons on the ground seemed to have turned into walking spicy strips. I'm a stinky brat, so I don't have any spicy strips. Bufang came to his senses, glanced at Hades' era, and said lightly. Buzz in the restaurant. Xiao Bai walked out of the restaurant. Sizzle on Xiao Bai's abdomen, a deep black hole rotated, and the thunder saber emerged. On the thunder saber, there seemed to be a lightning dragon moving, which was extremely terrifying. Xiao Bai can also clean up these skeletons, and he doesn't need spicy strips. Bufang said seriously. Hades' era's nostrils flared. He glanced at Xiao Bai, whose mechanical eyes flickered, then at the expressionless Bufang. Instantly, he smiled awkwardly. 5. How about 5 spicy strips? That's the lowest price. Hades' era clenched his teeth, saying with tears in his eyes. Seeing him like that, Bufang couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. He said calmly, all right. As soon as he said that, Hades' era seemed to be afraid that Bufang would go back on his words. He dashed out. The Hades' halberd was waved vigorously. Boom! Under the attack of Hades' halberd, a skeleton collapsed instantly, turning into scattered bones that scattered all over the ground. The will-o-wisps roared. The skeleton cavalrymen on the skeletons dashed forward. However, Hades' era wasn't afraid at all. With a sweep of his halberd, a group of skeletons was smashed into pieces. Hades' era, who rushed into the pile of skeletons, was like a ferocious god, as if he had entered an uninhabited land. As the great sage, it was indeed easy for him to kill these skeletons. Spicy strips! Spicy strips! Hades' era's hair fluttered as he waved Hades' halberd. With each sweep, he killed a skeleton. He shouted the words spicy strip. The will-o-wisps of the skeletons that were killed were jumping. What was the connection between skeletons and spicy strips? After a long time, there were no more skeletons crawling out of the ground, leaving only the remains of broken skeletons. Clad in the Hades armor and holding the Hades halberd, Hades' era stood where he was. The big red cloak behind him flapped noisily in the wind. It made him look cool. Rumbling sounds kept ringing in the sky. The battle between the great sage and the starry sky shocked the universe. It had long attracted the attention of many experts. In the void, there seemed to be many eyes opening, watching the monstrous battle in the starry sky. Earth Prison Dog's fame shook the whole Nether Prison. Although the great sage Acheron was not famous, he had always been the focus of many powers. As for the Sword Demon Patriarch, he was the patriarch of the Nether Prison's Sword Demon clan. The battle between these people had attracted the attention of the top great sage. It could be considered one of the top battles in the world, one that hadn't happened for many years. Nether Prison was completely crazy now. 1 against 100, almost all the small worlds in the Netherworld were his enemies. However, the mighty Nether Prison did subdue many small worlds. And now it was attacking Earth Prison. Earth Prison, guarded by Earth Prison Dog, was not so easy to attack. Earth Prison had the most great sage among all the small worlds except Nether Prison. If it wanted to attack by force, Nether Prison would have to pay a heavy price. In front of Acheron's restaurant, Bufang stood still. Looking at the broken skeletons on the ground, he breathed a sigh of relief. Then, he clasped his hands behind his back, turned, and was about to step into the restaurant. Suddenly, in the distance, Hades' era, leaning on the halberd, was startled. In the distant sky, clumps of black mist began to emerge. Black mist. Hades' era paused for a moment, then was shocked. The Black Temple? Since the Cave of the Fallen Gods had made a move, it was not surprising that the Black Temple would also make a move. He took a deep breath. Hades' era's expression changed dramatically. Bufang, be careful. The Black Temple was best at assassination. It had been so long, but Black Demon hadn't appeared. He must be waiting for an opportunity. If Black Demon hadn't gone to the battlefield of the stars, there was only one possibility. As his voice faded, Bufang, who was walking into the restaurant, paused and turned his head in confusion. He looked in the direction of Hades' era. He saw the anxiety in Hades' era's eyes. Anxiety? Why was he so anxious? Bufang froze. The next moment, Bufang's pupils constricted. The void in front of him began to twist violently. In the illusory void, a solid figure slowly emerged. It was an expert wrapped in black bandages, looking like a mummy. In his scarlet eyes, there seemed to be an eternal silence. Surprised? Black Demon sneered as he looked at Bufang, who had turned his head toward him. I don't know why the Sword Demon Patriarch emphasized that I should kill you. But as a professional assassin, I have to tell you seriously. Even if you're just a little saint who has just become a first-job saint, since someone paid a great price to kill you, you won't live to see tomorrow's sun, Black Demon said. Bufang raised his hand. The black bandages in his hand rolled up and turned into a dagger. Then, they turned into a dagger. The dagger was shrouded in pitch-black demon energy. Bufang's pupils constricted. A moment later, he saw Black Demon's dagger thrust out. The space seemed to be torn apart by this dagger. Heaven and earth seemed to be destroyed. Yu, who was standing next to Bufang, had a dull look in her eyes. Little Hu's jaw dropped and his eyes widened. Black Demon was very satisfied. He was most satisfied when he saw the shocked faces of those who were killed by him. Whether it was in the previous era or this era, Black Demon was the #1 assassin in the Netherworld. With his strength as a 9-revolution great sage, assassinating a little saint who had become a first-job saint, it was really a waste of talent. However, when he saw the shock in Bufang's eyes, he was still full of satisfaction. Die. Boom. The dagger suddenly thrust out. A moment later, it pierced into Bufang's body. This kind of power could instantly kill Bufang, a little saint. Black Demon was very confident. In the distance, Hades' era let out an unwilling roar. He had never thought that the supreme existence of the Black Temple would be so shameless. He dared to assassinate a little saint who had become a first-job saint. When you saw the dagger pierce into Bufang's body, a cold green light flashed in her eyes. Boom! A terrifying energy exploded. It seemed like it was going to swallow Bufang in a flash. However, a moment later, Black Demon froze. Bufang's shocked face slowly returned to normal. His eyes focused as he stared at Black Demon in front of him. Black Demon's dagger stabbed into his body, but it was blocked by the vermilion robe's invincibility. This time, the assassination that Black Devil was so confident in had actually failed. How could it be? Even the 9-revolution great sage, Black Demon, was bewildered, crying out involuntarily. Why is it impossible? Bufang's face was expressionless, incomparably cold. A moment later, Xiaobai, who was behind Bufang, moved. His mechanical eyes burst out with endless brutality. The thunder saber slashed out. Bufang's cold eyes also burst out with anger. The bandage disappeared. The Taotai arm roared. Yin and Yang energy swirled, smashing toward Black Demon's face. Nethery's eyes glowed with green light as she sent a slap towards Black Demon's face. Chapter 13:18. A 9-revolution great sage assassinated a little saint? How could there be such a shameless great sage in the world? In the distance, the Earth prison experts who had been watching the situation in Forbidden Soul City were stunned. Yinglong's pupils constricted. Yin Jiao, Jin Jiao, and the others couldn't help but suck in their breath. Not only them, but everyone was stunned as well. When it came to shamelessness, the Black Temple was indeed the most shameless. This damned Black Demon! Yinglong flew into a rage. He smashed the hollow eye staff hard on the ground. The next moment, he stepped into the air and flew toward Forbidden Soul City. He flew toward Forbidden Soul City. After watching for a long time, he finally couldn't help but join the battle. The other prison overlords stayed where they were. Yuji's eyes were full of worry. You're with Bufang. Will Bufang's danger affect you? But with her strength, she was not qualified to join the battle. So she could only stay here and worry. Black Demon didn't expect that he would fail. From the last age to the present age, he had only failed once, and this time was the second time. Even when he promised the great sage of the 9 nether prison clans to sneak attack on Hades Tenzang, he had never failed and seriously injured Hades Tenzang. That was why Hades Tenzang was killed by the experts of the 9 clans. But this time, he failed to assassinate a mere little saint. This was the second time he had failed since he made his debut. He still remembered the first time he failed. The person he assassinated was the strongest expert of the last age. It was a coincidence. He was also a chef. However, how could the chef in front of him be compared to that chef? The gap between them was like the gap between heaven and earth. Although his strength had dropped a lot after being bound in the Forbidden Land for an age and was no longer at his peak, it was impossible for him to fail to assassinate a little saint. Of course, he was, after all, the #1 assassin in the netherworld. After failing, he instantly came back to his senses. Facing the attacks of Bufang, Xiao Bai, and Yu, he naturally sneered disdainfully. The metal puppet was still alright, as it at least had the battle prowess of a 9th transformation little saint. But who the hell was that chef and that woman? A mere rank 1 and rank 2, little saint wanted to retaliate against him? Boom! The thunder battle saber was flung out, but it was easily flicked away by Black Demon's finger. Xiao Bai staggered a few steps back. Bufang's Taotai arm suddenly blasted out, wrapped in a terrible power. His fist smashed into the Black Devil's face. There was a muffled sound. The Black Devil grimaced in pain. The cold laughter continued to ring out. Are you tickling me? Black Demon laughed disdainfully. With his 9 revolution great sage cultivation base, even if he just stood there and let this little chef attack him, he would not be injured at all. Bufang's eyes were incomparably cold. His mind flickered. He planned to use the sword pot. However, just as Bufang was about to use it, he was interrupted by Yu's cold voice. Bufang was a little bewildered. Turning his head to look, he found that Yu's eyes had turned dark green. This Bufang's eyes shrank, Nethery's hand slapped out. It was extremely fast. Bufang retracted his Taotai arm. A moment later, Yu's slap landed on Black Demon's face. You little girl, do you also want to die? Black Demon sneered. He was incomparably confident. It came from his confidence in his strength. However, as soon as he finished speaking, slap. A crisp sound rang out. Yu's slap landed on his face. That slap made Bufang's face slightly strange. After Black Demon received a slap, he suddenly felt a chill run through his body. That kind of feeling made his body and mind feel numb. This feeling? Buzz, a streak of dark green flashed in front of his eyes. Dark green Black Demon's hair stood on end. His scarlet eyes stared at you as if he had seen something unbelievable. Boom! Black Demon's body flew backward, accompanied by a miserable howl. He fell on the ground in the distance, rolling continuously. Yu's eyes returned to normal, and she was a little dazed. She looked at her palm, puzzled. She didn't understand how her palm could be so powerful. She could send the great sage flying with a slap. Was she that powerful? Yu blinked her eyes, slightly dazed. Bufang looked at Yu, puzzled. Xiao Bai shouldered his saber, which was flickering with lightning. His fan-like palm scratched his bald head. Boom! A loud explosion rang out. Hell Overlord Inglong descended from the sky, holding the hollow ice staff. Hades Era also flew over, looking at Yu in shock. In the distance, Black Demon flipped over and stood up. The dark green light continuously spread on his face. His eyes were filled with fear as he touched his bandaged face. The bandages were falling off at a speed visible to the naked eye. Curse! This is a curse. Black Demon raised his scarlet eyes, looking at Bufang in the distance. His gaze fell on Yu, who was beside Bufang. It was as if he had seen a ghost. He seemed to be inexplicably afraid of this curse. It was as if he had seen the greatest taboo in the world. This guy knows about the curse on you? Bufang was instantly stunned. The curse on you was extremely mysterious. Although his dishes could suppress the curse, he didn't know the origin of the curse. Even Hades' Tenzang couldn't suppress it. All this time, Bufang thought that he could only find out the secret of Yu's curse in Nether Prison. After all, Yu and Yu were brought back from Nether Prison by Hades' Tenzang. However, he didn't expect that Black Demon, who came from the forbidden land of Earth Prison, would also know the secret of this curse. Curse. It's actually a curse. Black Demon seemed to have gone crazy. Then, the murderous intent in his eyes suddenly soared. The source of the curse. You're the source of destruction. You shouldn't exist in this world. You must die. The bandages on Black Demon's face fell to the ground. In the next instant, he crazily shot over. The green curse power on his face was constantly eroding, causing his power to continuously decline. However, his murderous intent toward you had reached a very terrifying level. It was even stronger than when he tried to assassinate Bufang. Yu's face was ashen. Bufang furrowed his brows. Prison Overlord Yinglong let out a long roar. The Void Eye Scepter swept out horizontally. Black Demon! Today, this old man will take revenge for old Hades. Boom! The Hollow Eye Scepter suddenly rose, and the ground instantly exploded. It shot toward Black Demon, who was shooting over. Sizzle! 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 A terrifying black ray shot out from the Hollow Eye Scepter, aiming at Black Demon. Black Demon's eyes were crazed. He raised his hand, directly grabbing that black ray. The ray crazily shot out, constantly shooting out from Black Demon's hand. However, he couldn't break free. Get lost! Black Demon's murderous intent surged as he roared. However, Prison Overlord Yinglong didn't try to hide. Instead, he fought with Black Demon. Hades' Era's eyes had long turned red. Holding Hades' halberd, he charged forward. His father was unparalleled in the world. He had led an army to attack Nether Prison, but in the end, he died tragically. All of this was because of this Black Demon assassin in front of him. Therefore, Hades' Era had to take revenge today. Get out of here, all of you! Black Demon's killing intent surged. All he wanted now was to kill you, the girl who carried the source of curses on her back. Boom! A great battle broke out in an instant. Black Demon, Hades' Era, and Prison Overlord Yinglong were engaged in a fierce battle. They were locked in a stalemate. With the enhancement of the Hades armor and the 7th Revolution Great Sage Yinglong Prison Overlord, Hades' Era actually fought to a draw with Black Demon, the 9 Revolution Great Sage, who was plagued by curses. Boom! Boom! This time, it was the Great Sage who attacked unscrupulously. The battle swept out in an instant. The ruins of Forbidden Soul City fell once more, and the ground crumbled. The Earth Prison experts in the distance were already stunned. They sucked in a cold breath, not knowing how to express their shock at this moment. At this moment, Earth Prison seemed to have completely turned into a battlefield. Acheron's little restaurant was safe and sound even under the Great Sage's aura. This caused many people to exclaim in their hearts. They could not believe that such a miraculous situation could happen. In the restaurant, Bufang glanced over his shoulder at Yu. He found that Yu's face had turned pale again. He furrowed his brows. An array emerged in his hand, and he placed it on Yu's forehead. Buzz, the cursed snake on Yu's body flicked its tongue and coiled around Yu. The curse seems to have recovered a little? This won't do. Bufang's face grew serious. He glanced at the battle that had broken out outside. Then, he helped Yu sit on a chair. After taking a deep look at the battle outside, he turned and stepped into the kitchen. Buzz, special reward mission released. Will the host accept? The system, which didn't answer Bufang no matter how hard he asked, finally spoke. Its serious voice resounded in Bufang's mind. Bufang, who had just lifted the curtain of the kitchen, suddenly looked serious. What's the special reward mission? Bufang took a deep breath and asked the system. The appearance of the previous host's information made Bufang feel a little complicated. Complete the mission, and you will receive the system's special reward. The system answered seriously. Bufang was silent for a while. There was no difference between giving an answer and not giving an answer. What's the mission? Special reward mission. Cook a dish from the God of Cooking's menu, 3-cup divine chicken. The system said. Cook? Bufang was stunned. He didn't expect that the system would give him a mission at this time. It actually asked him to cook a dish. Wait, suddenly, Bufang's eyes narrowed, as if there was a bright light flashing in front of him. The God of Cooking's menu. What is this? Bufang sucked in a breath of cold air and asked impatiently. However, this time, the system didn't answer him. It fell into silence. Does the host accept the mission? The 3-cup divine chicken has a majestic spirit essence, which can suppress the power of the source of curses. Does the host accept the mission? The system said seriously. Bufang. The system did this on purpose. It knew that it wanted him to suppress the curse in you, so it deliberately gave him this mission, right? It made it impossible for him to refuse. Bufang felt that this mission was a little strange, mainly because the timing of it was too coincidental. Suddenly, Bufang's heart shook. Is there any side effect of this mission? Bufang's eyes narrowed as he asked. The system was silent for a moment, then said, If you cook a dish from the God of Cooking's menu, you will receive a special reward. If you fail, you will be obliterated. Friendly reminder. The first time you eat a dish from the God of Cooking's menu, it will have a magical effect. If you fail, you will be obliterated. The system's words made Bufang freeze on the spot. However, according to the system, if you can cook this dish, maybe it can completely suppress the curse in you. If that's the case, Bufang glanced at Yu, who was leaning against the chair with a pale face in the distance. He took a deep breath, his face expressionless. System, if I cook it with my current cooking skills, what is the success rate? Bufang asked an important question. The system didn't answer immediately. It seemed to be calculating. After a long time, the system said, after careful calculation, if you cook a dish from the God of Cooking's menu with your current cooking skills, the success rate is 20%. 20%? System, are you kidding me? Bufang's face was expressionless. The corners of his mouth twitched and his eyes flashed. Okay, I accept this mission. A 20% success rate meant that he still had hope. Since there was hope, he would give it a try. It was good to be steady, but if he wanted to go higher, being steady was not necessarily good. There seemed to be a ball of fire burning in Bufang's chest. It didn't matter whether the system did it on purpose or not. At this moment, Bufang only had one thought in his mind. That was to *CK him. Chapter 13:19. A success rate of 20%. In other words, there was an 80% failure rate, which meant that the failure rate was as high as 80%. The failure rate was 4 times the success rate. When ordinary people heard this failure rate, they would close their eyes and choose to refuse the task. However, the system really didn't expect that Bufang would actually choose to accept this task. Moreover, he was very straightforward and didn't hesitate at all. Once this task was accepted, it couldn't be terminated. Once it was terminated, he would also be erased by the system. Bufang's choice stunned the system for a while. After a long time, it opened its mouth. It was still a serious voice. The host has accepted the task. The task begins. The recipe for the 3-cup divine chicken will now be issued. Please accept it. Buzz, the system's voice faded away. Bufang's eyes flickered with uncertainty. A moment later, he stood where he was and fell into deep thought. In his mind, densely packed information surged into his brain. In his spirit sea, the golden divine dragon, the vermilion bird, the black turtle, and the white tiger couldn't help but raise their heads, looking at a book that had emerged in the void with some horror. It was a golden book that was completely condensed from spiritual energy. Turbulent waves were constantly emanating from it. As the fluctuations spread, the artifact spirits in Bufang's spirit sea were shocked. This is the god of cooking's menu? What? How did Little Host come into contact with the god of cooking's menu so early? The system is trying to force Little Host to a dead end. The god of cooking's menu is out so quickly. The artifact spirits were all shocked. The divine dragon and the vermilion bird couldn't stop chattering. The system is stirring up trouble. Little Host is just a second-stage little saint. What's the success rate of cooking a dish from the god of cooking's menu? 10%? Or 20%? No matter what, the success rate is too low. White Tiger snorted proudly and said, "This is not something we can worry about. We just need to do our job well." The Black Turtle spoke, and the entire spirit sea fell silent. At this moment, Bufang naturally did not know what was happening in his spirit sea. At this moment, he was fully focused on reading and understanding the contents of the god of cooking's menu that were pouring into his mind. 3-cup heavenly chicken. Bufang took a deep breath, and there seemed to be golden lines flowing in his eyes. The 3-cup divine chicken was derived from a dish called 3-cup chicken on Earth. Bufang was no stranger to this. After reading the cooking method in the recipe, Bufang's face turned ugly for the first time. No wonder the system said that he only had a 20% success rate. The system said that he only had a 20% success rate because the system thought highly of him. If Bufang were to estimate it himself, it wouldn't even be 10%. Difficult, it was too difficult. Bufang could sense that there was a book in his spirit sea, which should be the god of cooking's menu that the system mentioned. However, he couldn't flip through the book at all. Even his connection with the artifact spirit had been cut off. Bufang furrowed his brows. Then, he turned and walked into the kitchen. Bufang stood in front of the stove. He took a deep breath, and the light in his eyes flickered. He carefully thought about the details described in the recipe. Details determine success or failure. No matter what you did, details were the most important, especially in cooking. A tiny detail in cooking could even determine the taste of the whole dish. As a chef, he must have the awareness to pay attention to details. 3-cup chicken, or rather, 3-cup heavenly chicken. It was called 3 cups because there were only 3 main seasonings in this dish. 1 cup of soy sauce, 1 cup of sesame oil, and 1 cup of rice wine. Only 3 cups of seasonings were needed to make a dish. Naturally, it was very difficult. Buzz, standing in front of the stove, he could see with the naked eye that ingredients appeared on it. These ingredients were extremely ordinary, without any spiritual energy or immortal energy, as if they were ordinary dishes that could be bought in the market in his previous life. Of course, the quality was excellent. A plucked chicken was placed in a blue and white porcelain bowl. But that was not the end. Bufang still needed to process the chicken a second time. Bufang didn't do it casually. He didn't dare to do it carelessly. Once he failed to cook this dish, he would be erased. When the system said the word erased, it didn't show any emotion. Bufang believed that once he failed, the system would mercilessly erase him. The system wouldn't be merciful just because he was the host. Thus, Bufang didn't dare to be careless. Closing his eyes, he calmed the excitement in his heart. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, Bufang opened his eyes. His gaze was calm, without any emotion. There was no fear of being erased if he failed, and there was no fear of the low success rate. There was only the calmness and ease of a chef. Swish, the black turtle constellation wok was placed on the white tiger heaven stove. The flame drilled into the stove and immediately started burning. The scorching temperature exploded. Instead of using the spring of life, Bufang poured the water the system had prepared for him. This water was clear and sweet, but it didn't have any spirit energy or immortal energy. With an indifferent look, he poured the water the system had prepared into the wok. The water boiled. Bufang scooped out the water, putting it into the blue and white porcelain bowl. Swish, without using true energy to cover his palm, the scalding hot water made Bufang furrow his brows. He carefully plucked all the feathers from the chicken, not leaving a single hair behind. After checking carefully, Bufang grabbed the chicken, placing it on the chopping board. At this moment, his hands had already been scalded red by the boiling water. Bufang was bewildered. Suddenly, he felt as if he had returned to his normal cooking state. He took out the dragon bone kitchen knife. After twirling it in his hand, he slashed it down. Swish, he chopped off the sturdy chicken leg, cut it into pieces, and placed it on a plate. Gulp, gulp. Bufang poured the oil into the wok. The hot oil in the wok began to boil in an instant. Then, he poured the chicken pieces into the wok. Suddenly, Bufang's mental force erupted. Next was the important cooking process that concerned life and death. His divine will suddenly boiled. In Bufang's spirit sea, his mental force seemed to be spinning fast. In Bufang's eyes, everything seemed to have slowed down. The boiling oil in the wok seemed to solidify as it slowly spurted out. As his mental force poured into the chicken like silk, he could clearly see the heat of the oil drilling into the muscles, and he could clearly see the chicken turning solid. In his spirit sea, the artifact spirits seemed to hold their breaths. There can't be a single mistake. The cooking of the god of cooking's menu must be perfect. If it's not perfect, it can't be selected. As long as there's a slight mistake, it means failure, and you'll be obliterated. The artifact spirits sighed with emotion. As artifact spirits, they had seen too much. They didn't expect this moment to come so soon. However, this was also a test for their host. If the host could pass this test, that was to gain their true approval. Then, they would wholeheartedly help Bufang embark on the road to becoming the god of cooking. As artifact spirits, it was a very cautious thing to be sincere. Swish. The oil splashed, and the golden oil dripped from the meat into the bowl. After shaking it and draining all the oil, Bufang began to prepare for the other cooking process. He had already memorized every step of cooking the dish. The so-called god of cooking's menu was all about using the most common ingredients to cook the best delicacies. This was a very strict test for a chef. Only by perfectly grasping every opportunity could a dish be cooked to perfection. Outside the restaurant, the terrible battle continued. After the breakthrough, Yinglong prison overlord and Hades Era fought against Black Demon of the Black Temple. The noise of the battle shook the world. Above the sky, under the starry sky, in the boundless starry sky battlefield, several figures clashed at high speed. Every time they collided, a terrifying energy spread out, bombarding the surroundings. As a result, some of the warships floating in the void began to crumble and shatter. The battle between the great sage was incomparably terrifying. In the restaurant, Yu sat on a chair, her face pale. The pain in her body made her furrow her brows. Little Hu, in her arms, stuck out his tongue, licked Yu's face, bringing her warmth. His fluffy tail stroked Yu's face, as though he was relieving Yu's pain. In the kitchen, Bufang, on the other hand, was concentrating on cooking. His eyes were wide open and bloodshot. He didn't dare to make the slightest mistake, so he had to concentrate. If one looked carefully, they would see that Bufang's hand, which was holding the kitchen knife, was trembling. Although he had emphasized that he should cook calmly, when it came to the actual situation, Bufang couldn't calm his trembling heart. Sizzle, sizzle. He poured the first cup of sesame oil into the wok. When the sesame oil boiled, he added the chopped scallions and ginger. As the stir-frying began, Bufang's mental force burst out again. Everything seemed to become very slow in his eyes. After stir-frying, Bufang put the chicken pieces, which had been drained of oil and water, into the wok. He shook the wok and stir-fried. The angle, strength, and speed of stir-frying all had strict requirements. Any mistake would lead to a mistake in the dish. Beads of sweat trickled down his forehead. His eyes were bloodshot, as though they were about to be completely blinded. This feeling Bufang was exhausted from head to toe. He stir-fried for about 5 minutes, shaking the wok dozens of times. The color of the chicken pieces changed. At this moment, Bufang poured the second cup of rice wine into the wok. It was just an ordinary rice wine. It was cloudy and yellow, but the fragrance of the wine left an unforgettable impression in Bufang's mind. Swish, when the rice wine entered the wok, the entire wok seemed to explode. The wok began to boil, and sizzling sounds echoed unceasingly. After a while, Bufang took a deep breath. He raised his hand, grabbing the last cup of seasoning on the stove. However, as soon as his fingers touched that cup, Bufang's body stiffened. He couldn't even move. The blood vessels in his eyes expanded. Swoosh in his eyes, Bufang slowly closed his bloodshot eyes. At the corners of his eyes, blood-colored tears trickled down his cheeks. With a splash, they dripped on the kitchen floor. The immortal flame on the stove began to shake violently, flickering as if it would extinguish at any moment. It's over. Not good. He's going to fail. Little Host's current cultivation base is too weak. His mental force, which has just entered the divine will realm, is indeed not enough. Failure means death. The path to becoming the god of cooking is really tough. Little Host couldn't endure it in the end. In the Spirit Sea, the artifact spirits' faces changed. When they sensed Bufang's condition, they all sighed. Even the narcissistic divine dragon, the lively vermilion bird, the dull black tortoise, and the arrogant white tiger all sighed. Perhaps this was the last emotion they could leave to their host of this generation. Acheron's little restaurant sitting in the restaurant, seemed to sense something. She was bewildered, turning her head to look at the restaurant. Little Hu, in her arms, also lifted his head. In the battlefield of the stars, the giant black dog, whose eyes were like the starry sky, glanced in the direction of Earth Prison's Acheron's little restaurant. There seemed to be thousands of emotions moving in its eyes. Heaven and Earth farmland, the sky had turned blood-red. Nyo Han-san stood in front of the wooden hut, his face complicated. In the kitchen, Bufang's body shook violently. The sweat on his forehead and the blood at the corners of his eyes seemed to merge together. Then, he opened his eyes. A pair of blood-red eyes emerged. Chapter 13:20. Blood-red eyes. They were filled with a thick blood-red color. Blood vessels densely covered the eyeballs, as if congealed blood was moving in them. At this moment, Bufang's mental force was released to the extreme. In his Spirit Sea, the vortex was constantly spinning as if it would explode if it was not careful. Once it exploded, it meant that Bufang's cooking had completely failed. In the Spirit Sea, the tool spirits all had complicated faces. 20% or even only 10% was too risky for a chef. More importantly, it would increase the psychological burden. The greater the burden, the more nervous one would be. The more nervous one was, the easier it was to make mistakes. When Bufang's eyes were completely bloodshot, the tool spirits knew that their host of this generation was likely to fail. Buzz, Acheron's little store in the kitchen, blood trickled down the corners of Bufang's eyes. In his eyes, the stove in front of him had turned into a blood-red color, as if it was covered with a layer of blood mist. His Spirit Sea fluctuated violently, and the flames in the stove flickered. This meant that at this moment, Bufang's mental force was fluctuating violently. This was not good news. The greater the fluctuation of his mental force, the weaker Bufang's control of his mental force was. Bufang's hands were trembling. He was holding the last cup of seasoning for the 3-cup chicken, which was the dark red soy sauce. The cloudy soy sauce was placed in the blue and white porcelain cup. Bufang held it, gently shaking it. Ripples burst out in the soy sauce, colliding with each other. Was he going to fail? At this moment, Bufang's heart was a little confused. He could feel that at this moment, his strength seemed to be completely drained. His heart was so tired that he seemed to want to lie down and sleep at any time. However, Bufang didn't dare to sleep. He didn't dare to easily break the taut string in his heart. Once it broke, it would mean that everything was over. What god of cooking dream? What future? Everything would become nothingness. In the heaven and earth farmland, at this moment, the entire heaven and earth farmland underwent a huge change. The sky turned blood red, and the surging pressure threatened to destroy the heaven and earth farmland at any time. Nyo Han-san walked out of the wooden house and looked at the void with a complicated gaze. 80 raised its chicken butt and lay on the ground. It hugged its head with its wings and buried its body in the ground. The 8 treasures pig also lay motionlessly on the ground, shivering. Clang! The bucket of milk that Jing Yuan was carrying just now also fell to the ground, and milky white milk spilled all over the ground. A rich milky aroma spread out at this moment. What happened? Whether it was Nyo Han-san or Jing Yuan, they both felt that the heaven and earth farmland was about to collapse at any moment. It was a terrible feeling. It was as if doomsday had arrived. Perhaps something happened to Owner Bu. Right now we can only hope that Owner Bu will be able to survive this calamity. Nyo Han-san sighed. His gaze deepened. In the restaurant, Yu's face paled. Little Hu, who was in her arms, also craned his head. Swish! The sound of a chair moving rang out. Yu stood up from her seat and quickly walked toward the kitchen. Her gaze fell on the kitchen. However, before she could step into the kitchen, Xiao Bai's majestic body appeared. His mechanical eyes flashed, blocking her way. Yu was bewildered. The blue light in Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes dissipated. He shook his head, signaling Yu not to go in. Yu glanced at Xiao Bai, then at the kitchen. However, with this glance, she couldn't see the situation in the kitchen at all. Hence, she was somewhat helpless. However, just now, she felt that her feeling was correct. In the kitchen, it was as if he had experienced a long struggle. The bandage in his hand loosened. This was the system's test for him, and it was also a challenge that he had to face in order to embark on the road to becoming the god of cooking. Bufang couldn't fall at this stage. Boom! The flames burned. The bandage fell down and was burned by the fire in the stove. On his Taotai arm, yin and yang energy swirled, turning into yin and yang fishes, hovering gently. Bufang was stunned. He stared at his arm seriously. Tai Chi gave birth to yin and yang gave birth to the 4 divisions. Bufang's eyes slightly lit up. In his mind, something seemed to have broken out of its shell. His mental force was still flowing, and the ingredients in the wok were sizzling and emitting a fragrance. It was a mellow fragrance, however, it still lacked a hint of real charm. Bufang looked at the yin and yang energy in his hand. The corner of his mouth suddenly twitched. He seemed to be smiling. In his spirit sea, the artifact spirits could feel Bufang's joy at this moment. It's over. Little host has gone crazy. Golden Divine Dragon's face was full of despair. At this time, crying was the right way for little host to open up. Why was he smiling? He had failed to cook a dish in the God of Cooking's menu and was about to be wiped out. Why was he smiling? However, the other artifact spirits paid no attention to Golden Divine Dragon. They were suddenly looking forward to it. At this moment, as artifact spirits, they could feel the confidence coming from Bufang. This confidence truly moved them. That's right, they were really moved. Where did little host get his confidence? Who gave him that confidence? Boom! All of a sudden, the expressions of the artifact spirits changed. The divine will phantom spirit sitting cross-legged in the two spirit vortexes slowly rose to its feet. With the divine will phantom spirit as the center, the almost dried-up spirit sea began to rotate again. Crazy! He's really crazy! Is he going to make a breakthrough on the spot? This kind of crazy behavior. If he fails, his soul will explode. He'll never be able to reincarnate. This time, whether it was the golden divine dragon, the vermilion bird, or the black turtle, they were all startled. Bufang's behavior was too crazy. Rumble! An earth-shattering change took place in his spirit sea. With the divine will phantom spirit as the center, the vortexes kept spinning. As they spun, they actually split into two. It was like a mandarin duck pot in a hot pot. This, even the experienced and knowledgeable black turtle was slightly taken aback. One side was peaceful, while the other was violent. When the two blended, a terrible rotating force burst out. As it spun endlessly, the originally withered mental energy actually started to spread out bit by bit. The divine will phantom spirit became the center of the yin and yang fish. It began to slowly stagnate. It was at this moment that it became stronger and had a breakthrough. As it continued to condense, the divine will phantom spirit became more and more powerful. His mental force, which had only just entered the divine will stage, reached a full level at this moment. Swish, the mental force in the spirit sea spread out like wisps of silk. A moment later, the four artifact spirits were moved. Because they found that Bufang's will was spreading in the spirit sea. They couldn't help but release their divine might in the spirit sea. They stood at different ends of the spirit sea. They looked at each other from afar. What was this? The artifact spirits were dumbstruck. Whether it was the appearance of the yin and yang fish or the mysterious fluctuations they formed when they split their power in four directions, they all nourished the divine will in the spirit sea. It was an extremely mysterious method. The black turtle's cloudy eyes slightly widened. This is the aura of the law? The black turtle was shocked. Even with his long life, he was shocked by the scene in Bufang's spirit sea. The spirit sea of the four symbols and two extremes actually had the aura of the law. How did the little host do it? How did the little host know about this? He didn't pay attention to the shock of the artifact spirits in his mind. Bufang opened his eyes. The smile at the corner of his mouth slowly faded away. His face was still as calm as ever. His mental force, which was about to collapse, suddenly skyrocketed. Boom! In the stove. The flame was blazing, and the light was surging as if it was about to soar into the sky. Bufang's hand, which was holding the blue and white porcelain cup, was also steady. Swish, the soy sauce was splashed into the wok. Holding the spatula, his mental force twined like wisps of silk. Boom, boom, boom. In the black turtle constellation wok, the fire rose to the sky. As Bufang shook the wok, the ingredients jumped in the fire. Sparkles burst out from the ingredient. He added the last ingredient, stir-fried it, and decorated it. This was the most difficult dish he had ever cooked since he made his debut, and now, he had finally completed it. The blue and white porcelain plate was placed on the table. Holding the black turtle constellation wok as steady as Mount Tai, he poured the dish out. As the sauce was poured into the wok, it instantly spread to the entire bowl. The dish in the bowl seemed to be emitting streams of light. He didn't use any top-grade ingredient. He used the most ordinary ingredients to make the most top-grade delicacy. Perhaps this was the strength of the god of cooking. Buzz, as the last piece of chicken was placed on the plate, the entire dish suddenly sublimated. Thousands of streams of light scattered. Terrifying essence chi surged out of the plate like mushrooms after the rain. Like the source of a clear spring, it gurgled out. In the end, it spread to the entire room, covering the entire room in an instant. This feeling was extremely terrifying. It was as if he wasn't facing a dish, but a savage beast with terrifying vitality. Bufang's face was incomparably complicated. Even though he had condensed the yin and yang spirit sea, even though he had used the artifact spirit to create the four quadrants array, he forced his nearly dried-up mental force to bloom again. However, this was, after all, a means of overdrawing. After cooking this dish, Bufang lay down with blood dripping from his nostrils. The veins in his eyes began to recede, and his eyes became clear again. He staggered backward, leaning against the cupboard, gasping for breath. His mouth was filled with majestic spirit essence. Did I succeed? Soaked in sweat, Bufang rubbed his forehead, shaking his head as he muttered under his breath. The 3-cup divine chicken was a dish in the God of Cooking's menu. Bufang stood up, feeling the emptiness in his body. He couldn't help but feel scared. In fact, he could almost be considered a failure. If he hadn't condensed the yin and yang spirit sea, and if his divine will hadn't broken through at the last moment, at this moment, what awaited him might have been obliteration. After gasping for a few breaths, Bufang finally relaxed his body and mind. Following the steps, he finally completed the dish with great difficulty. Although Bufang's strength might be really weak, the dish in the so-called God of Cooking's menu didn't seem to have much to do with strength. It was more related to spirit, energy, and spirit. Perhaps the 20% success rate that the system mentioned was the breakthrough he had just found. Buzz, a buzzing sound rang out. It was as if the system was muttering to itself. Analyzing dish, analysis complete. The dish in the God of Cooking's menu is evaluated as completion rate, 51%. Congratulations to the host for completing the task. The system's serious voice rang out in Bufang's head. As soon as he said that, Bufang's body and mind relaxed. His whole body seemed to be drained in a flash. He was scared. A 51% completion rate. It was only 1% more than what he had expected. If he didn't have this 1%, the system might judge it as a failure, and what awaited him would be obliteration. Although the system kept saying that he would be obliterated, but earlier, after accepting this task, Bufang really felt a terrible murderous intent from the system. It was this murderous intent that made Bufang's mind restless. In the spirit sea, swish in the sky, the golden book floating in the air suddenly started flipping slowly. Finally, it stopped at a certain page. Moreover, on the blank page of the book, a series of golden words appeared and were written on the book. Mental force gathered crazily on the blank page. Soon, it turned into 3 drops of golden liquid. In the spirit sea, the artifact spirits stared blankly at the 3 drops of golden liquid on the golden book. They were shocked, sucking in breaths of cold air. Dingling. The kitchen curtain was lifted and the bell gently swayed. Under Nethery's gaze, Bufang, his face bloodless, held the plate with both hands and slowly walked out, one step at a time. Chapter 13:21. Bufang walked out of the kitchen. His pale face startled you, as well as little Hu was in Yu's arms. It was the first time they saw Bufang in such a dispirited state. However, even though his face was unsightly, Bufang still maintained an expressionless face. He placed the 3-cup divine chicken on the table. It was an ordinary dish, and its fragrance wasn't strong at all. Only the majestic spirit energy was dispersing. Was this a dish cooked by Bufang? Just now, Bufang was cooking this dish in the kitchen? You looked at Bufang suspiciously. Was Bufang really cooking? Why did cooking give him the feeling of death? Cooking? Was it really that dangerous? Eat it. I made it especially for you. Bufang pulled a chair and sat down. Seeing Yu's suspicious face, he calmly said, "Made it especially for me?" Yu blinked, looking at Bufang. Then, she picked up the chopsticks. Seeing that Yu was about to eat, Bufang's mind completely relaxed. He slumped on the chair, looking dispirited. He began to think about what had just happened. The Great Tribulation just now could be considered the greatest tribulation he had encountered so far. He was just a hair's breadth away from facing death. And that was also the first time Bufang had been so close to death. This kind of death crisis didn't come from an invincible expert, nor from a terrifying enemy. Instead, it came from the system which was the closest to him. Thus, Bufang began to think about the origin of the system. Until now, the origin of the system had always made Bufang suspicious and curious. And now, Bufang found that in this netherworld, there seemed to be a previous host of the system. What did that mean? Every time Bufang thought about it, he felt a chill run through his body. The system was not a benevolent person. Perhaps it would help you reach the peak, but if you failed, you would be mercilessly abandoned. Perhaps it was time for him to correct his attitude towards the system. In the past, Bufang had always been dependent on the system, even though it wasn't a strong one. But at least it existed. In his eyes, the system seemed to be shrouded in a thick layer of fog. The system worked hard to cultivate generations of hosts into god of cooking. But why? Bufang was not a fool. There was no such thing as a free lunch in the world. You had to give to get something in return. In the past, Bufang had always thought that he earned essence crystals, nether crystals, and immortal crystals for the system, while the system provided him with resources to help him grow. It was a fair exchange. But now it seemed that wasn't the case. He took a deep breath. The taste of blood filled his mouth. Bufang narrowed his eyes. This time, if he hadn't condensed the yin-yang tai chi spiritual sea, he might have been abandoned by the system and killed by the system like the previous host. The appearance of the yin-yang tai chi spiritual sea might have been beyond the system's expectation. That was why it gave him a chance to live. That was where the problem lay. The yin-yang tai chi spiritual sea came from the world of his previous life. Could it be that his previous life had something to do with the system? Narrowing his eyes, Bufang leaned back in his chair and fell into deep thought. In the distance, Nethery grabbed a pair of chopsticks and picked up a piece of 3-cup chicken. 3-cup divine chicken was a dish in the god of cooking's menu. With a taste of ginger and garlic, it looked like an ordinary dish. The aroma didn't match the identity of the dish in the god of cooking's menu. However, it was this dish that almost took Bufang's life. You looked at the brownish-red chicken nugget, opened her pale lips, and stuffed it into her mouth. When her teeth closed, the first thing that burst out of her mouth was the taste of oil. The chicken was first fried in oil to remove all the water. Then, it was put into the wok and stir-fried. This kind of chicken was incomparably fragrant and full of elasticity. When she bit down, it was as if her teeth were rubbing against each other. Yu's eyes couldn't help but light up. Moreover, the most important thing was, she bit the piece of meat. The rich meaty aroma was so mellow that Yu was completely wrapped in it. She didn't even have the ability to think. All that was left in her mind was her love for this dish. She kept reaching out her chopsticks and picking them up. Before she knew it, she had finished the entire dish. Boundless essence chi flowed into her body. Yu's pale face instantly turned red, and it was so red that it looked tender and beautiful. Squeak, Little Hu squatted aside, looking at Yu with a little grievance as she finished the entire dish. Although the aroma of this dish wasn't strong, Little Hu still felt a strange feeling. It was desire. Yes, it was a desire that people couldn't refuse. Facing this desire, Little Hu wanted to eat it very much. However, Yu had finished it in one breath. This made Little Hu feel very wronged. Yu looked at Little Hu, then at the blue and white porcelain bowl. Her eyes revealed a look of disbelief. This dish seemed to have a special magic power. It was simply incredible. Was this a dish made by Bufang? Why was it completely different from the previous dishes? It wasn't on the same level at all. The previous dishes had an aroma that spread 10 miles away, and they looked, smelled, and looked good. However, the aroma of this dish could only be known by those who had tasted it. Glancing at Bufang, who was sitting in a chair in the distance, contemplating, Yu's eyes seemed to have a flowing light. Buzz, all of a sudden, on Yu's body, It was as if there was a strange fluctuation spreading. Soon, her grayish-green hair disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, it completely turned into a jet-black color. The jet-black color returned to its previous color. Moreover, rumble. The aura on Yu's body began to rise vigorously. If others saw this kind of rise, they would be absolutely stunned. Because Yu had just drunk the top-grade Acheron of helplessness a few days ago, which improved her cultivation base. But now, she had just eaten a dish cooked with extremely ordinary ingredients, and she had begun to break through. Boom, boom, boom. It was like a series of explosions. Yu's aura kept rising. From the 2nd revolution, little saint, she had broken through to the 9th revolution, little saint. A dish had reached the peak in just one thought. Even Bufang, who was contemplating in the distance, was startled. He suddenly turned to look at her. He noticed that Yu's cultivation base was rising rapidly. She was already a 9th revolution, little saint? Bufang was bewildered. He was dumbstruck. No. It can't be because of the dish. Bufang deeply furrowed his brows. Although the 3-cup divine chicken was not bad, it might be able to improve Yu's cultivation base. But it was impossible for Yu to break through so much in an instant. Ordinary people had to cultivate for hundreds of years to go from the 2nd revolution, little saint, to the 9th revolution, little saint. If a dish could do that, it would be too heaven-defying. Perhaps the top dishes in the God of Cooking's menu could do that, but this 3-cup divine chicken definitely couldn't do it. Bufang's heart moved. He raised his hand, and the array on his finger moved, covering his eyes. Then, in Bufang's eyes, he could see the cursed snake winding around Yu's body beginning to spread into Yu's body. The 3-cup divine chicken seemed to have melted the cursed snake's power, making it seep into Yu's body, strengthening Yu's power. It made Yu reach the 9th revolution, little saint level in just a flash. Moreover, this didn't seem to be the end. The cursed snake fused into Yu's body, and in her dantian, it seemed to have turned into a small world. Of course, he didn't know how long it would take for this small world to take shape. Bufang retracted his gaze, his brows furrowing. The cursed snake had completely fused with Yu. He didn't know whether it was a good thing or a bad thing for Yu. Buzz, when you finish the 3-cup divine chicken, the system's voice rang in Bufang's spirit sea. Congratulations to the host for completing the special reward task. The task reward will now be issued. Task reward? Bufang's eyes lit up. This was a task that had a slim chance of survival, so Bufang was looking forward to the task reward. Task reward. A fragment of the God of Cooking set, a God of Cooking's menu, and 3 drops of the God of Cooking's divine power liquid drops. The system's serious voice rang in Bufang's mind. A fragment of the God of Cooking set? Bufang narrowed his eyes. This task actually gave him an extra fragment of the God of Cooking set. He now had 4 more God of Cooking sets, and there were 4 artifact spirits in his spirit sea. He was also very curious about the last God of Cooking set. However, it was still a little difficult to exchange for the last God of Cooking set. The main reason was that he had only collected 2 fragments of the God of Cooking set. According to Bufang's calculation, he might need 5 fragments to exchange for the last God of Cooking set. That meant he still needed to complete 3 more tasks. Therefore, he didn't know how long it would take to collect all the fragments. As for the God of Cooking's menu, it should be the golden book that appeared in his spirit sea. What was the God of Cooking's divine power liquid drop? The reward of the last task made Bufang completely dumbfounded. It sounded like a very good thing. At this moment, in Bufang's spirit sea, the 4 artifact spirits were completely stunned. Even the usually calm black tortoise widened his eyes in disbelief. White Tiger narrowed his eyes, looking enviously and longingly at the 3 liquid drops floating above the book. The power emanating from the liquid drops almost made the 4 artifact spirits kneel on the ground. Nicholas the handsome dragon, am not mistaken, am I? Is that really that thing? Little host can touch this thing so soon? Perhaps this is the compensation for cooking the god of cooking's dish this time. After all, with little host's strength, it is impossible for him to complete it. Since he has completed the impossible task, he will naturally get the impossible reward. The artifact spirits were talking to each other, and with the emergence of the divine power liquid drop, their feelings toward Bufang began to quietly change. In his spirit sea Bufang's figure emerged. The eyes of the 4 artifact spirits fell on Bufang at the same time. There was a rare look of awe in their eyes. This kind of look was completely impossible to see in the past. It showed that the artifact spirits had begun to truly acknowledge Bufang. Of course, Bufang was more curious about the 3 divine power liquid drops that floated above the god of cooking's menu. From the reverence and desire with which the artifact spirits looked at the liquid droplet, this liquid droplet seemed to be very unusual. In his spirit sea, the artifact spirits looked at Bufang with awe and curiosity. The spiritual force phantom sat cross-legged in the center of the spiritual sea whirlpool. The yin and yang spiritual sea actually emitted the aura of the laws. Even the previous host, moreover, it was unable to produce even a trace of the aura of the laws in his spirit sea. What did this mean? This showed the little host's potential. As part of the god of cooking set, they naturally wanted to choose a master with potential. Bufang seemed to fit the bill. Boom, boom, boom. Outside the restaurant, the battle was still ongoing. Terrifying battle fluctuations swept out, causing the entire heavens and earth to boil and clamor. Billowing smoke filled the air. This was a battle on the level of the Great Sage. When the Great Sage experts who had yet to enter the celestial battlefield fought, the shock waves they caused were enough to destroy a city. Shrouded in smoke and dust, Acheron's little restaurant was like a small boat floating in the vast sea. It seemed like it could be destroyed at any moment. Boom! A beam of black light slashed down. Inglong Prison Overlord and Hades' Arrow were sent flying backward. They landed hard on the ground, causing it to completely sink. Fissures continued to spread out densely in the sky. Black Demon, shrouded in black mist, exuded a terrifying aura that shook the heavens. He had suppressed the power of the curse, so he could deal with them. After all, he had the cultivation base of the 9 Revolution Great Sage, so it was not difficult for him to deal with Hades' Era and Inglong Prison Overlords. You're courting death. That woman has the source of the curse. It's the energy that can destroy the world. Do you want this era to be completely destroyed by protecting such a person? Black Demon's voice was filled with suppressed terror. Tui, shut up. Don't try to change the topic. I'm going to smash you, ugly bastard. Hades' Era held the Hades halberd, his red cloak fluttering in the wind. Inglong Prison Overlord held the hollow eye staff and looked up indifferently. I'm here to avenge Lord Tiansong. Lunatics, you 2 lunatics. If that's the case, I'll kill both of you, then I'll kill that witch. Black Demon said coldly. The demonic energy in the sky gathered and turned into a cold, pitch-black dagger. Suddenly, Black Demon and the others were stunned. They turned their heads and looked into the distance. In Acheron's little restaurant, which was like a small boat in the vast sea, the clear sound of footsteps rang out. A thin and slender figure slowly walked out from it. Bufang's face was pale and bloodless. Standing in front of the restaurant, he raised his head and looked at Black Demon in the distance. Then, Bufang raised his hand. In his spirit sea, under Bufang's control, a golden liquid drop of divine power began to evaporate. Tell me, who do you want to kill? Bufang stood in front of the restaurant, looking at Black Demon in the distance and asking calmly. At this moment, in Bufang's spirit sea, when the artifact spirits felt the golden liquid drop begin to evaporate, they covered their faces in disbelief. What is little host doing? He's wasting God's gift. Killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. Chapter 13:22. As a man who had been through great storms, Black Demon had seen all kinds of horrors. The fact that he had survived from the last era to the present was enough to prove his ability. Now, he didn't expect that a mere second revolution little saint would dare to threaten him. Were all the little saints so arrogant nowadays? As he looked at Bufang, who was standing in front of the restaurant, the killing intent in his scarlet eyes grew stronger. The sword demon patriarch had specifically ordered him to kill this little chef, and he hadn't done it yet. He didn't expect that the little chef would come to his death. Since that was the case, he couldn't be blamed. Black Demon's eyes shone with a sharp light, as if there was a surging killing intent in them. It was as if two fire dragons were slithering in his eyes, sweeping across the sky. Hades Era and Yinglong glanced at Bufang and couldn't help but shake their heads. Although Bufang was very strange and had extraordinary means, he was just a chef, a second revolution little saint. He was growing fast, but no matter how fast he grew, he couldn't cross the Real barrier and fight a 9-revolution great sage, could he? Even an ordinary great sage was not someone Bufang could compare with. The great sage was already the top existence in the netherworld. Any great sage had gone through countless hardships to grow up. They were the true rulers of this world. So when Bufang walked out of the restaurant and said those words, Hades Era and Yinglong thought that Bufang was joking. They didn't care. Buzz, Hades Era's eyes narrowed. The Hades halberd in his hand curled up, and a terrible sharpness gathered on the Hades's halberd. The next moment, he waved it, and a terrible destructive force burst out of it, shooting toward Black Demon in the distance. The big red cloak behind him flapped noisily. He stomped on the ground, and the ground suddenly caved in, turning into a huge pit. Hades swung his halberd. The will of the heavenly path was surging. It was the will of the heavenly path that belonged to the small world that Hades Era had condensed. The one who became the great sage had to condense his own will of the great path. Only then could he break free of the netherworld's shackles and walk among the stars. This was a privilege that belonged to the great sage. Courting death. Black Demon's gaze turned cold again. With a fierce sweep of the dagger, tens of thousands of black lights soared into the sky. It was as if the entire world was shrouded in darkness. There was a loud bang. When the dagger and the halberd collided, a terrifying explosion erupted. Hell Overlord Yinglong also flew out, his eyes of the void sweeping out. The ground was instantly torn apart, and gravel shot up, smashing towards the Black Devil. The dagger swept horizontally once again, easily slicing apart the frightening boulders that came smashing down from the sky like tofu, scattering them all over the ground. They fell to the ground and continuously collapsed. Rumble. Black Demon rapidly swept over. He suppressed the curse power in his body, and his fighting prowess soared instantly. His figure was like a phantom, disappearing into the turbulent space under the void. When he reappeared, he was right in front of Hades Era. The dagger gently swept across, as if it wanted to cut Hades Era into two halves from head to toe. Boom! An explosion rang out. Hades Era flew out as if he had teleported. And behind him, a 10,000 feet long stream of light erupted from the dagger, shattering the entire ground. The surging Acheron River seemed to have been cut off. Terrifying power! Terrifying power! All the experts who were watching the battle kept quiet out of fear. They didn't dare to say a word. They watched from a distance. A battle at the level of the great sage was something they could only watch from afar. They didn't dare to come close. Hades Era felt a huge pressure. He could feel Black Demon's mocking aura. That's right. It was a joke. After all, Black Demon was the 9-revolution great sage. He was much stronger than him. It would be easy for him to kill him. If Black Demon hadn't been affected by Nethery's curse, he would have died. He would have been defeated long ago. If Earth Prison Overlord Yinglong hadn't come to his aid, he would have been dead. Your Excellency Hades, get out of the way. Inglong's voice came from behind him. Hades' era was bewildered. Then, he moved several thousand miles away. Black Demon's figure was exposed. Black Demon was bewildered. He looked at Inglong suspiciously. Inglong's eyes suddenly turned silver. A moment later, the shadow of a dragon rang out. Inglong turned into a 10,000-foot-tall Inglong, hiding in the void. His fleshy wings flapped as if he was stirring up a storm in the sky. Rumble! Rumble! The hollow eye scepter was embedded in the middle of Inglong's head, turning into a silver eye. Buzz! A fine silver light shot out of the silver eye. The silver light turned into a twisted little dragon. The little dragon seemed to tear the sky apart as it shot toward Black Demon. Not bad. If that mangy dog used it, I might be a little afraid. But you're just a big worm. I'm not afraid. Black Demon sneered. A moment later, his body rolled. He turned into a pitch-black tornado. Buzz, above his head, a small world emerged. It was a pitch-black world wrapped in a hazy black fog. The whole world was shrouded in terrifying darkness. How nostalgic! When the Black Temple was at its peak, we shook the whole world. But now we're being humiliated by a big worm. A look of nostalgia appeared in Black Demon's eyes. A moment later, he slowly pulled out the dagger in his hand. The power of the will of the Great Path flowed on the dagger. Buzz! Black Demon faced the little silver dragon. Black Demon's dagger slashed horizontally. It carried the will of the Great Path. The black fog rolled, and the will of the Great Path seemed to have materialized. There was a loud bang. The little silver dragon was cut in half by the dagger. Black Demon's figure arrived in a flash. He suddenly approached. He clashed with the giant Inglong in the sky. The result of the battle was soon revealed. After all, Inglong was much weaker than the 9-revolution great sage. One of his wings was cut off, and he turned back into a human. He fell from the sky and smashed hard into the ground, causing the ground to cave in. Nether King Ha flew over, holding Inglong, who was lying on the ground. Inglong was getting older, and he looked like he was in danger. Weak, Black Demon laughed in the sky. A moment later, his target was Hades' era. This big worm is injured. It's your turn now. The Black Temple has been silent for so long. It's time to make a move to intimidate the world. Black Demon said coldly. Then a dagger was flung out. The black will of the Great Path circulated, as if it was going to break everything. Die. He aimed at Hades' era. Hades' era roared. His aura soared, as if it was going to soar into the sky. He pointed Hades's halberd at Black Demon. Are you ignoring me? All of a sudden, an indifferent voice resounded. The voice lingered in everyone's ears. Black Demon was slightly stunned. Nether King Ha's movements also paused, looking over suspiciously. Not only them, but the people who were watching the battle from afar were also dumbstruck. Then, there was an uproar. Is this little chef crazy? This is a battle between the great sage. He's just a 2nd revolution little saint. What is he going to do? The great sage can easily kill him. The people around all sucked in their breath. They all thought that Bufang was crazy. However, was Bufang really crazy? Bufang was not crazy. In Bufang's spirit sea, the liquid drop hovering over the golden book began to evaporate. The system called it the god of cooking's divine power liquid drop. Could it be a liquid drop condensed from the god of cooking's divine power? That seemed to be the case. Moreover, judging from the artifact's spirit's desire for it, it must be something good. So, Bufang decided to use 1 drop, Buzz, under the control of his mental force. The golden liquid drop began to evaporate. At a speed visible to the naked eye, it slowly evaporated. Before long, it completely disappeared from Bufang's spirit sea. The artifact's spirits watched in astonishment as Bufang used a divine power liquid drop. The golden divine dragon's face was full of grief. What a waste! Boom! A drop of the god of cooking's divine power liquid drop evaporated. Bufang slowly raised his hand. His heart skipped a beat. It was as if he had inadvertently sensed a supreme aura pervading the air. It spread to the whole world, as if it could pierce through heaven and earth. A pair of eyes that seemed to open from the chaos suddenly fell on Bufang. All the pores on Bufang's body opened and tightened. Buzz, an invisible wave suddenly enveloped Bufang's whole body. It made Bufang feel as if an ocean of power was filling his body. This was the first time he had felt this way. Boom! A shocking aura spread out from Bufang's body. It seemed to turn into a ripple that spread out with a loud rumble. The next moment everyone was stunned. Yinglong, who had fallen to the ground and was dying, narrowed his eyes and looked at Bufang in disbelief. Nether King Ha sucked in a breath of cold air, bewildered. Black Demon narrowed his eyes. When he sensed the power that whistled like a gale, he held his breath. This aura, this feeling. Black Demon's eyes flashed with a violent look. I finally understand why the Sword Demon Patriarch wants me to kill you. Your aura is exactly the same as that person's. Boom! The next moment a shrill cry rang out. A terrible roar exploded in the void. A rumbling sound echoed out. Black Demon tore through the sky and stepped into the turbulence of the void. It sped toward Bufang at full speed. In less than half a breath, Black Demon approached Bufang from thousands of miles away. Over his head, the small world shrouded in black mist churned. The will of the great path rumbled. In front of him, it turned into a pitch-black dagger. The will of the great path surged on it. Such a familiar aura, but it's not the same person. The Sword Demon Patriarch wants to kill you because you haven't grown up yet. You're a second revolution, little saint. Even if you have that person's inheritance, you can't resist a great sage. So, you can die now. You must die. That demon girl must die too. Rumble. The void shattered inch by inch. From thousands of miles away, it turned into a ravine-like turbulence of the void. The violent energy of the void pressed toward Bufang. It wanted to pierce through Bufang completely. Bufang's face was expressionless. The yin and yang energies kept flowing on his Taotai arm. The golden liquid drops of divine power that had evaporated seemed to spread throughout his body. The Taotai arm seemed to have a great suction force that kept sucking in the divine power. Bufang's arm turned golden and shone with a dazzling light. The light was so dazzling that it seemed to have turned into a blazing sun. This energy was enough to destroy heaven and earth. Bufang became indifferent. It seemed the use of the divine power liquid drops had made his heart numb and cold. Hades Era and Yinglong widened their eyes, taking in cold breaths. In the distance, the experts who were watching the battle were so frightened. They thought that Bufang would die for sure. He could shatter the turbulence of the void for thousands of miles. How strong was Black Demon? This move could blast Bufang until not even his bones were left. It was just a moment. Black Demon approached, his monstrous murderous intent aimed at Bufang. Die. Black Demon said coldly. The dagger slashed horizontally. The will of the great path surged on it, and the void shattered inch by inch. Facing this dagger, Bufang exhaled, his face expressionless. After evaporating a divine power liquid drop, Bufang felt as if he was above everything. Looking at the savage Black Demon, the corners of Bufang's mouth twitched. Even if you're a 9-revolution great sage who can destroy heaven and earth, I will give you a Taotai arm. As soon as he said that, a dazzling golden fist shot toward Black Demon. Chapter 1323. You're courting death. Black Demon's roar was like a thunderclap exploding in the entire Earth prison. Everyone felt their eardrums swell, and their minds were shaken. The terrifying power seemed to be tearing the sky apart. Along the way, the void within 1,000 miles shattered, turning into fragments that filled the sky. Countless void turbulences ran amok. Boom! Black Demon's eyes were filled with killing intent. The chef who inherited the inheritance and the demoness who bore the monstrous curse had to die. With this move of his, he had to eliminate both of his greatest threats. He wanted to use his power to calm everything down. Roar. His roar shook the sky, and Black Demon's aura surged. At this moment, the aura of the 9-revolution Great Sage was displayed to its fullest, as if it could destroy heaven and earth. With one move, it could crush everything. There seemed to be light shooting out of Bufang's eyes. His face was calm and expressionless. Looking at Black Demon, who was tearing through the void, he seemed very calm. There was no reverence for the existence of the Great Sage. There was only a hint of mockery at the corner of his mouth. That's right, it was mockery. Black Demon felt that he was not mistaken. This little chef, who looked like an ant, had the corner of his mouth curled up, mockery. Even Hades' Era and the others, who were watching from afar, thought that Bufang must have gone crazy. If he wasn't crazy, why would he show a mocking expression when facing the Great Sage? What right did he have to mock the Great Sage? The golden light seemed to burst out from the darkness. It lit up the entire sky. A punch suddenly shot out. Without dodging, it collided with Black Demon's dagger. Black Demon's dagger, which was shrouded in monstrous black demonic energy, tore through the void, causing the void turbulence to explode. However, Bufang's punch met it without hesitation. Boom! A loud explosion rang out. Everyone was dumbstruck. Bufang's punch collided with Black Demon's dagger. Rumble! Terrifying fluctuations and brilliance suddenly erupted, enveloping everything. Everyone heard a cracking sound. That crisp sound was like the sound of bones breaking, but also like the sound of iron breaking. Hell Overlord Inglong's eyes widened. Hades' Era was also in disbelief. Young Bufang, has he been turned into ashes by Black Devil's punch? After all, Black Demon was the Great Sage of the 9 Revolutions realm. The prestige of the Great Sage was not to be trifled with. What right did the 2nd Revolution Little Saint have to contend against the 9th Revolution Great Sage? The explosions were still going on. The next moment, everyone was dumbfounded. A figure flew out from the explosion. With a speed as fast as lightning, he suddenly smashed into the ground in the distance. They plowed deep ditches on the ground, and within the ditches, soil flew everywhere. The entire earth seemed to be on the verge of shattering from this collision. Hula! A gust of wind suddenly whistled past. The light and dust were all blown away. Then, amidst the scattered light, a figure slowly walked out. It was a slender figure with a thin body. His black hair fluttered and his long robe fluttered. Bufang's face was indifferent, cold, and emotionless. He raised his golden arm, slowly walking out. With one punch, he had sent a 9th Revolution Great Sage flying. Bufang didn't show any joy or sorrow. It was as if he had done something very normal. However, Bufang's unscathed appearance shocked everyone. They all sucked in a breath of cold air. How could it be? Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Or am I seeing things? It must be fake. A 9th Revolution Great Sage was sent flying by a 2nd Revolution Little Saint with one punch? The experts who were watching the battle from afar were all dumbfounded. They didn't know what to say. At this moment, they felt as if a mountain was suddenly pressing down on their hearts. It was so heavy that they couldn't even breathe. It wasn't just them. Prison Overlord Inglong and Hades' Era were also dumbfounded. They looked at Black Devil, who was in the ruins, and then at the calm and unscathed Bufang. The outcome of this collision was far beyond their expectations. Bufang. Young man, this is... Hades' Era's mouth seemed to be stuck. He didn't know what to say, so he just stared at Bufang. Inglong's eyes lit up. He knew that Bufang was magical, but he didn't expect Bufang to be so magical. With a single punch, he had sent a great saint who had unleashed a terrifying attack flying. Was he going to break the norm and wash away everyone's impression of him? Stepping on the ground, Bufang glanced at his golden arm. Even Bufang didn't know how much power it contained. It was a power that was beyond his imagination. Bufang knew about the will of the Great Path, and this power seemed to be above the will of the Great Path. Just by touching it with his mental force, he couldn't help but feel his mind tighten. Was this the so-called divine power? The power of a god? Bufang's eyes gradually became sharp. In that case, how strong would the so-called gods be? After a drop of divine power evaporated, it gathered on Bufang's fist, making Bufang's Taotai arm even stronger. It gave Bufang the illusion that he could destroy the world with one punch. Of course, it was just an illusion. One punch had broken Black Devil's attack, breaking his bones and breaking his dagger. At the same time, he had consumed 1/3 of the divine power liquid drop's energy. In other words, after one drop of divine power was crushed and evaporated, it was enough for Bufang to punch 3 times. After 3 punches, the divine power would no longer exist. Impossible! Black Devil crawled up from the ground. The bandage on his face fell and melted, dripping dirty liquid. His scarlet eyes were filled with disbelief and shock. The punch of a mere second revolution little saint had broken his attack, his defense, and the bones of his great sage body. What kind of monster was this? No. This power doesn't belong to you. Black Devil's eyes shrank. He seemed to have thought of something. His scarlet eyes were suddenly filled with fear. Then, his body once again emitted a monstrous aura. Black demon energy gathered above his head, forming a world. It was a pitch-black illusory world. As soon as that world appeared, Black Devil's power skyrocketed. It was Black Devil's little world, which contained his will of the Great Path. The 9 Revolution Great Sage's little world was basically no different from a real little world. The will of the Great Path it contained had also become stronger. You're right. This power doesn't belong to me, Bufang said calmly. The tip of his foot gently tapped the ground. Instantly, the entire ground exploded. Boom! Bufang's figure was like a cannonball, shooting toward Black Devil. Raising his hand, his golden fist bloomed with radiance. Black Devil roared. His body seemed to have turned into a black mist, intending to take it away. However, as soon as he flew up, Bufang's dazzling golden fist smashed down again. Boom! The golden fist suddenly blotted out the sky. It shot out from Bufang's position. Then, it smashed into the black mist. Bang! The black mist exploded. Black Devil's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. His body fell from the sky, smashing into the ground, stirring up dust. Bufang walked slowly. He walked in front of Black Devil. All the onlookers held their breaths, not daring to breathe. This scene, which seemed to be the end of the world, shocked them greatly. The 2 Revolution Little Saint had killed the 9 Revolution Great Sage? This was a heaven-defying act. You can't kill me. A look of fear finally appeared in Black Devil's scarlet eyes. In the face of Bufang's power, which did not belong to this world, Black Devil finally felt despair. He only knew that the demon witch's curse was terrible, but he did not know that this little chef was also so strong. The sword demon patriarch was right to tell him to kill Bufang as soon as possible. He hated that he was too arrogant and did not kill the little chef completely. Now, he wanted to give the little chef a chance to turn the tables. This power was the same as that of that man. Is that man going to return again? Black Devil could not help but tremble. This is the 3rd punch. This punch won't spare you. Bufang raised his fist again. The golden light on it had dimmed a little as he pressed it against Black Devil's head. The bandage on Black Devil's head spilled all over the ground. His body was trembling. You want to kill me, and now you say you want to kill you, so you can't give me a reason not to kill you. Bufang looked at Black Devil and said lightly. Black Devil's pupils constricted. Since you can't give me a reason, you can go to hell, Bufang said, his face expressionless. As soon as he finished speaking, boom! The golden light suddenly shone brightly. A punch bloomed under his fist. The dazzling light illuminated the whole world. Terrible explosive energy surged in an instant. Hades' Era and Ing Long were thrown backward by the force, and they felt as if they were flying toward the celestial vault sect. After a long time, only then did the surging rumble dissipate. Then, when everyone saw the scene, they all sucked in a cold breath. The whole ground caved in, as if a meteorite had crashed into it. A huge pit appeared, and the edge of the pit rolled up. Only Acheron's little store was left, standing alone in the pit. Bufang stood in the center of the pit. The golden light on his fist had already disappeared, leaving only white smoke rising from it. The vermilion robe fluttered in the wind. On the ground there was a small pit. In the pit a figure was kneeling. This figure was Black Devil's figure. Black Demon's bandages tore apart inch by inch, revealing his figure underneath. It was a withered body. There was no moisture on his skin, as if it was as dry as bones. Bufang withdrew his fist. His body staggered and fell to the ground. Swish! It turned into a puff of green smoke, dissipating. A 9-revolution great sage, the master of a forbidden land, died just like that. Silence. Lifeless. Unbelievable. All kinds of emotions gathered from all directions. Hades' Era brought Ing Long prison overlord down from the sky and landed next to Bufang. Looking at Black Devil, who was left with only a pile of remains on the ground, finally, his face couldn't help but tremble in horror. He had killed a 9-revolution great sage with 3 punches. Were chefs nowadays so irritable and arrogant? The elusive lord of the Black Temple was killed by a chef just like that. He hadn't been destroyed in the calamity of the epoch, and he hadn't fallen in the hands of the peak great sage. He had died under the fist of a 2nd revolution little saint. This was the most humiliating way to die. For a 9-revolution great sage, the death of a master of a forbidden land was naturally shocking. In the sky, under the starry sky, in the boundless starry sky, terrible explosions stirred up waves of energy. Thousands of swords swept around Sword Demon Patriarch as if they were going to cut heaven and earth. Suddenly, his expression changed, and he looked at the sky in disbelief. His eyes were filled with horror. Black Devil is dead? Sword Demon Patriarch said in disbelief. Lord Go had transformed into a fat dog, his paws blotting out the sun, and his body was surrounded by burning earth prison fire. His dog eyes were also filled with amazement. Black Devil is dead? Who killed him? Lord Go couldn't help but mutter to himself. The ghostly fire in the golden skeleton's eye sockets flickered as it stood on the bone dragon's head. In the same place, great sage Acheron burst out laughing. Ha 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 ha! That disgusting Black Devil is dead? This is retribution. Now that the master of the Black Temple is dead, you, the master of the Cave of the Fallen Gods, are not far from death. Are you afraid? Acheron Great Sage laughed excitedly as he stepped on the torch dragon's head. His laughter made the golden skeleton's face darken. Go! Blood-colored ghostly fire surged out of his eye sockets in a flash, turning into a huge wall of fire that blotted out the sky. Then, the golden skeleton rushed away from the battlefield with the bone dragon, fleeing at top speed. The death of the Black Devil brought him boundless fear. As the masters of the Forbidden Lands who had lived in the same era as Black Devil, he naturally knew how much power was needed to kill Black Devil. If Black Devil could die, then he, the so-called indestructible skeleton, would probably die as well. So, he had to run. As long as he hid in the Cave of the Fallen Gods, everything would be fine. As Great Sage Acheron laughed heartily, the golden skeleton of the Cave of the Fallen Gods fled. Sword Demon Patriarch, who was confronting Lord Go, grew unsightly. How could Black Devil be dead? Did that woman from God Vanishing Mountain make a move? Impossible. Even if she made a move, she couldn't have killed Black Devil. He pinched his fingers together, and an endless stream of sword light fell from the sky, turning into a river of stars that swept across heaven and earth. The next moment, over his head, a small world filled with sword energy emerged. A streak of silver sword light shot out from the small world. Stepping on the sword light, he left the battle with Lord Go and fled into the distance in a flash. Black Devil is a good-for-nothing. It's so difficult for him to kill a chef. No wonder he could only survive until this era. Sword Demon Patriarch's face was gloomy, and his mind was deep. Lord Go and Great Sage Acheron did not chase after him. They looked at each other, then rushed out of the battlefield of the stars. They were also very curious about who killed Black Demon. Chapter 1324. Sword Demon Patriarch fled. The Lord Go didn't use his claws to capture him. It was not easy for a 9-revolution Great Sage to capture an opponent. After all, a 9-revolution Great Sage was already a top expert in this world, and one had to pay a huge price to capture him. If the Lord Go wanted to capture Sword Demon Patriarch, he had a way, but he didn't want to expose his true trump card for a mere Sword Demon Patriarch. Sword Demon Patriarch's departure was because Black Demon was killed. The fall of a 9-revolution Great Sage was no small matter, and it was enough to shock the whole netherworld. Black Demon's identity was very special. He was the Lord of a forbidden land from Earth Prison. The fall of a Lord of a forbidden land meant the demise of a forbidden land. Even when the patriarchs of the 9 Nether Prison clans swept through the Forbidden Lands, they only sealed the lords of the Forbidden Lands and didn't kill them. The main reason was that the price paid to kill the lord of a forbidden land was very high. Even the experts of the 9 Nether Prison clans were reluctant to pay such a price. He watched as Sword Demon Patriarch flew away on his sword. A mocking look came into Lord Go's dog eyes. Then, Lord Go turned his head and looked under the dome. The clouds were rolling, but it made Lord Go's eyes flicker more and more. Who is it? How could someone kill a 9-revolution Great Sage? Great Sage Acheron came over, laughing. It was obviously a great achievement for him to scare away the golden skeleton, so he was very excited. Lord Go glanced at Great Sage Acheron and twitched his mouth when he saw the latter's happy look. "Is that all you've got?" Lord Go said lightly. Great Sage Acheron was displeased. You didn't see Jean Lou's face. He was so scared that he almost peed his pants. Ah, I'm so happy to see him. After so many years, I've finally seen these fellows embarrass themselves. The Great Sage Acheron was overjoyed. Lord Go rolled his eyes. A skeleton can pee? Why don't you pee for me to see? Let's go back and take a look. The fact that he was able to kill Black Demon means that his methods are definitely not ordinary. I really want to see, who was it that could actually kill Black Demon? The fat on Lord Go's chubby face jiggled. Hell. Acheron's little store. Smoke and dust billowed, leaving behind only a huge pit, within which rocks tumbled down. Hades Era, Yinglong, and the others all looked at Bufang strangely. Twisting his neck, Bufang exhaled. Then, he glanced at Hades Era and the others before walking toward the restaurant. You stood in front of the restaurant, holding little who was wagging his tail, in her arms. After the great battle, the restaurant fell into an endless silence. Rocks tumbled down from the ruins. Hades Era and Yinglong walked toward the restaurant. The people around them kept quiet out of fear. They realized that they had really underestimated this restaurant. They had thought that the chefs in this restaurant were just fish on the chopping block. Now it seemed that they were completely wrong. An expert who could kill the Great Sage was just a fish on the chopping block? If they had to face the Great Sage, they would have been slapped to death. Hades Era and Yinglong stepped into the restaurant. In the distance, the other Hell Overlords also flew over. After the battle, they were concerned about the safety of Yinglong and Hades Era, so they rushed over. In front of the restaurant, Bufang clasped his hands, slowly stepping into the restaurant. You looked at Bufang with a strange gaze. Bufang, is there any more of that dish? I still want to eat. You stuck out her tongue, licking her rosy lips as she said to Bufang. Still want to eat? The 3-cup divine chicken, the dish in the god of cooking's menu, must be delicious. However, he had risked his life to cook this dish. If he hadn't fused the yin and yang spirit sea by chance, Bufang might have been killed by the system. This was a dish that he had cooked with his life. There's no more. Bufang looked at Yu, his face expressionless. Yu's face showed a look of regret. F***ck. Outside the restaurant, when Hades' Era saw Yu, he screamed. His scream startled Yu, and little Hu, who was lying comfortably in Yu's arms, was so scared that his hair stood on end. Little Hu stared at Hades' Era unhappily. You little girl, how did your cultivation base increase so much all of a sudden? Hades' Era looked at Yu and sucked in a breath of cold air. As a great sage, he could naturally see the overflowing cultivation base in Yu. 9 Revolution Little Saint Realm. How did she reach the 9 Revolution Little Saint Realm? What happened? Why was this world completely different from the world he knew? First, Bufang killed the great sage with 3 punches, then you broke through to the 9 Revolution Little Saint Realm in an instant. These changes were really too exciting. Prison Overlord Yinglong also noticed the changes in you, and his eyes shrank. Although his face was pale, he took a step forward and stood in front of you. Looking at Yu's face, his eyes suddenly shone brightly. The power of the curse in your body seems to be a little strange? Yinglong's old voice rang out. Yu and the others also stepped into the restaurant. At first, they looked at Bufang in fear, then their eyes locked on Yu. Secondly, they were shocked by Yu's skyrocketing cultivation base. 9 Revolution Little Saint Realm. How did this little girl become stronger than them all of a sudden? This restaurant. How could there be so many strange things? I ate Bufang's food. She felt that it was necessary for her to give them a serious explanation. Therefore, he told them about the 3-cup divine chicken he had cooked and what had happened to it. Although you told them the truth, the others didn't believe her. One dish made your cultivation base skyrocket to the 9 Revolution Little Saint Realm? Hades' Era's eyes widened, as if he couldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. If you can level up like that, what's the point of cultivating? Let's go and eat. Hades' Era said in disbelief. Prison Overlord Yinglong and the others also fell silent. That's right. They didn't believe Yu's words either. After all, one dish made the 2nd Revolution Little Saint Realm 9 Revolution Little Saint Realm. It was just a fantasy story. Previously, Bufang had brewed a wine that could help the great sage and the little saint break through one realm, which was already unbelievable. A dish that could make people's cultivation base soar. How could it appear? Did Bufang cook it with divine herbs? How sensational would such a dish be? And how many nether crystals would it sell? One could imagine that a cup of wine worth 1 million nether crystals could only help the little saint break through one realm. If such a dish that could make people's cultivation base skyrocket appeared, how expensive would it be? If there really is such a dish. Bufang, young man, don't say anything else. Give me 10 servings first. Hades' Era waved his hand and said impatiently. Bufang glanced at Hades' Era. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not everyone can eat that dish, Bufang said. That dish is exclusive. It's not for sale, Bufang said. You're being biased. I have plenty of money, Hades' Era said unhappily. In response to that, Bufang chose to ignore it. He didn't even bother to answer. Rumble! In the sky, 2 figures tore through the sky and appeared, hovering in midair. Lord Dog's body was surrounded by earth prison flame, which could destroy everything, burning and surging. Yellow Spring Great Sage was at his side. Both of them looked down at the ground, gasping when they saw a huge crater in the ground. The Black Fiend really lives up to his reputation as a madman. There are many great sages who choose to fight in the celestial battlefield, but that madman chose to fight on land. Judging from the shock waves, this entire area is going to be destroyed. Great Sage Acheron said as he looked at the huge crater. The air is filled with boiling energy. There's Black Demon's remnant will of the Great Path, and also a strange energy, Lord Dog said as he twitched his nose. His eyes shone brightly. He smelled an unusual energy. That energy made Lord Go's heart palpitate. The shock waves of the battle were caused by a single strike. This means that Black Demon was killed in an instant. Lord Dog's fat body trembled as he walked in the void, his voice indifferent. Great Sage Acheron took a deep breath. How could it be? Black Demon was killed in an instant? Who could do that? However, this time, Lord Go didn't answer him. Instead, he floated into Acheron's little store. They saw Acheron's little store. My wine. Great Sage Acheron was excited when he saw Acheron's little store. He dashed into the restaurant. As soon as they entered the restaurant, they felt something unusual. However, the atmosphere was extremely harmonious. Bufang was behind the counter, wiping a porcelain bowl with a clean white cloth. As for you, she was holding Little Hu, sitting on a chair in the distance. Hades Era and the others looked at you with fear and disbelief. Everyone had a strange look on their faces. Although they looked harmonious, they felt a little strange. The fat on Lord Go's body shook. He stepped into the restaurant. Bufang, my little friend, here's my wine, Great Sage Acheron said. As soon as he finished speaking, Bufang flipped his hand, sending a green jade jar flying toward Great Sage Acheron. Great Sage Acheron grabbed the green jade jar, feeling excited. He squinted his eyes and stroked it with a satisfied expression. When Lord Go and Great Sage Acheron found out that Bufang was the formidable existence who killed Black Demon, they blinked their eyes, not believing it. Lord Go even stared at Bufang. His sharp gaze made Bufang's hair stand on end. However, after Hades Era and Yinglong nodded, they had no choice but to believe it. They could choose not to believe Hades Era, but Yinglong's words were credible. Hence, Lord Go and Great Sage Acheron were shocked. However, they weren't interested in Bufang's methods. The former went back to the Path Understanding Tree and slept soundly. As for Great Sage Acheron, he held the green jade jar and carefully played with it. Although Hades Era told them that Bufang had killed Black Demon with 3 punches, they were still slightly surprised. However, they were just surprised. The way Lord Go looked at Bufang had returned to normal. Bufang boy. After some exercise, Lord Go is hungry. Give me a plate of sweet and sour ribs. Lord Go looked up from under the Path Understanding Tree and said to Bufang. Bufang nodded. Then, he put down the porcelain bowl he was wiping, turned, and stepped into the kitchen. The atmosphere was still as harmonious as ever. In Nether Prison, the void was torn apart. A beam of silver light suddenly cut through the void. Stepping on a silver sword, Sword Demon Patriarch flew back to Nether Prison. Black Demon's death had stimulated him. Terrified, he fled at top speed. After returning to Nether Prison, Sword Demon Patriarch thought for a while, then put his hands behind his back and walked away with a deep look in his eyes. Instead of returning to the Sword Demon clan's land, he flew toward the D Ting clan's land. The next day, after entering the D Ting clan's land, Sword Demon Patriarch left on his sword. That night, no one knew what Sword Demon Patriarch and the D Ting clan's patriarch discussed. The next day, the patriarchs of the 9 clans flew out of their respective clans and gathered in the D Ting clan's land to discuss matters. It didn't last long. 3 days later, the patriarchs of the 9 clans left again. As soon as they left, the news of Nether Prison's conquest of Earth prisons spread throughout the Netherworld. The great sage of the West Little Buddhism realm uttered an Amitabha, as he sat cross-legged on the lotus and soared into the sky, stepping onto the battlefield of the stars. Fire Demon Patriarch laughed and charged into the battlefield of the stars with Shadow Demon Patriarch. A great battle broke out instantly. The experts of the West Little Buddhism realm and Nether Prison all looked up at the sky and saw that it had turned into a sea of fire. Rumble! There were peerless experts fighting within. After a long time, the sea of fire disappeared and the sky split open. A flaming palm that blotted out the sky slammed down. It slapped toward the huge Buddha that loomed over the West Little Buddhism realm. Boom! The whole West Little Buddhism realm shook. Then, the cultivators watched with widened eyes as the huge Buddha of the West Little Buddhism realm crumbled inch by inch in the endless sea of fire. The three great sage Buddhas who had charged into the sky were turned into ashes in the flames. 81 pagodas crumbled at the same time. The West Little Buddhism realm had fallen. In the Vajra realm, a deafening roar filled the air. A burly man with a bare upper body threw out a punch and pushed back the Nether Prison army. With both hands, a one-revolution great sage of the Nether Prison was torn in half in an instant. His terrible aura shook the heavens. Behind the burly man, there was a dense crowd of burly men, who beat their chests and roared, cheering for the top great saint from the Vajra region. They laughed excitedly. When they saw the Nether Prison experts being forced back by their great sage alone, they could hardly contain their excitement. However, their laughter soon came to an abrupt end. The great sage of the Vajra realm stared at the void with his eyes wide open. Over there, the sky above the Nether Prison army was torn apart. A youth stood on top of it. His gaze was calm, and there seemed to be strength in his eyes. The patriarch of the Tyrant clan, the great sage of the Vajra realm, roared. Then, the youth in the sky gently punched out. The punch flew toward the great sage of the Vajra realm. It was covered with a vast amount of energy and blood essence. Chi and blood were like raging waves, and wherever they passed, many Vajra region experts were evaporated by the power of this chi and blood. Like the Vajra realm, the Tyrant clan cultivated the fleshly body, and with it, they could be invincible in the world. When the patriarch of the Tyrant clan attacked, his power shook heaven and earth. The great sage of the Vajra realm let out an unyielding roar. He threw out a punch as well, which swept across the sky. The Tyrant body versus the Vajra body. The two collided. This was a collision between the peak of the fleshly body cultivation. The void exploded. Half of the Vajra realm was shaking, and the ground was crumbling. Boom! Under the punch, the experts of the Vajra realm were instantly killed. How dare a firefly compete with the bright moon? You can only die. Take down the Vajra realm and prepare to attack Earth Prison. The Tyrant Patriarch clasped his hands behind his back and said lightly. His figure flickered in the void. At the same time, the patriarchs of the 9 clans appeared in every small world. The battles that could be sustained collapsed in an instant. They were all defeated. In the Heaven Chief realm, the Heaven Tree bloomed with supreme light, its branches swaying in the void. Every time it lashed out, a little saint would be smashed to pieces. The void floated in midair. A huge 3-horned rhinoceros hovered in it. The rhinoceros's horn was smashed, and its eyes were dark and uncertain. The Heaven Chief realm will be flattened sooner or later. Let's retreat, gather the army, and attack Earth Prison. A deafening voice rang through the 5th floor of Heaven Chief realm. Then, the terrifying Nether Prison army retreated. The branches of the Heaven Tree swayed and cracked. Soon, a figure emerged from the branches. The figure stood at the top of the Heaven Tree as if looking into the distance. Realm Lord Dit, naked, stood at the side of the figure, his eyes flickering. The great calamity of Earth Prison had come. How would Earth Prison survive this time? Half a month had passed since the battle of the Great Sage. However, during this time, the whole Earth Prison did not relax at all. Instead, it became more and more tense. It was as if there was a sharp sword hanging over everyone's head. This made every Earth prison expert feel an extreme sense of crisis. They also knew that this was the prelude to the coming war. The Nether prison experts were going to attack Earth prison. This was absolutely disastrous news for Earth prison's experts. Earth prison was strong, but Nether prison was stronger. It was hard to say whether Earth prison could withstand Nether prison's attack. If Hades Tenzang were still here, they might not be so worried. After all, Hades Tenzang was the pride of Earth prison. However, Tian Tsang had fallen. Although the current Hades had become the great sage, he was still growing and could not stand on his own. Nether prison, on the other hand, had the great sage patriarch of the 9 clans. Therefore, Earth prison's experts felt a haze hanging over their heads. Forbidden Soul City had been rebuilt. He gave it a new name, Yellow Spring City. Today, Acheron City had become the most popular place in Earth prison. Countless Earth prison experts had gathered here. After all, Acheron City was the safest place in Earth prison. With Earth prison dog and great sage Acheron City, the 2 peerless experts of Earth prison, here, even if a war broke out, they could find some comfort. Of course, the strangest thing was the mysterious little restaurant in Acheron City. Acheron City's little restaurant. There was a long and narrow line of people standing in front of the restaurant. These people were from the aristocratic families of Hell. The experts of these families were all very powerful. But now, they were all waiting in front of the restaurant. Before long, some people walked out of the restaurant, their faces full of satisfaction. Rumble. Someone walked out of the restaurant. He walked a few steps drunkenly, then sat cross-legged on the ground and began to break through. The whole of Acheron City had been shrouded in lightning punishment during this period of time. Inside the restaurant, Bu Fong frowned. Looking at the long and narrow line outside, he couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. After Nether prison announced its war against Earth prison, the whole Earth prison was boiling. Nether prison experts, who were not eager to improve their strength, rushed to his restaurant like crazy. They spent 1 million nether crystals to buy the supreme-grade Acheron Helplessness wine. This greatly increased the sales of the supreme-grade Acheron Helplessness wine. This made Bu Fong feel extremely strange. Did Nether prison increase the sales of his store's fine wine? Should he thank Nether prison? Meanwhile, the experts who drank the supreme-grade Acheron Helplessness wine broke through one after another. The great sage of Acheron City sat in the restaurant, fiddling with a jade jar. He was reluctant to drink the wine in the jar. He would rather spend 1 million nether crystals to buy it than drink his own wine. This strange behavior made Bu Fong quite speechless. Glancing at the wine in the jar, Bu Fong breathed a soft sigh of relief and closed the lid. He would no longer sell the Acheron Helplessness wine. Then, he turned to the group of people waiting in line. With an indifferent face, he said, "The supreme-grade Acheron Helplessness wine has been sold out. From now on, there will be no more supreme-grade Acheron Helplessness wine." Bu Fong's voice was not loud, but with the help of his divine will, it spread throughout the whole Acheron City. The faces of the experts waiting in line outside the restaurant turned very unsightly. What many people were worried about had finally come true. After all, the supreme-grade Acheron Helplessness wine was limited. Because of their hesitation, those who came later to buy the wine could no longer buy it. Many people left dejectedly. Some people complained to Bu Fong. Some even knelt in front of the restaurant, crying and begging to buy the wine, and even offered double the price. However, Bu Fong still refused. It was not that he didn't want to sell it, but Bu Fong would not sell the rest of the wine. Bu Fong knew what they were thinking. When the war began, the stronger one was, the greater the chance of survival would be. However, Bu Fong had his own principles. He closed the restaurant's door. Bu Fong went into the kitchen. He began to cook. Before long, he walked out of the kitchen with a steaming plate of sweet and sour ribs. He placed it on the table. Lord Go had already placed his paws on the table, looking forward to it. As soon as the steaming sweet and sour ribs was placed on the table, the sparkling sauce under the light attracted Lord Go's taste buds. It made Lord Go salivate. Ring, ring. Bufang walked out of the kitchen again. This time, he held a bowl of dragon blood rice, which was overflowing with essence energy. Although Yu's curse had fused a lot, it still needed to be suppressed. Dragon blood rice couldn't be better. As for little Hu, Bufang had prepared a plate of explosive meatballs and divine seal dumplings for him. On this day, after Lord Go finished his sweet and sour ribs, he left. No one knew where Lord Go went. After Yu was full, she went back to her room to sleep. As for little Hu, he swallowed several explosive meatballs. His eyes instantly widened. Behind his buttocks, a bulge appeared, and his fair fox face was flushed red from holding it in. With a smacking sound, the third tail sprang out from his butt. The 3 white tails danced in the air. Little Hu narrowed his eyes in excitement. Bufang calmly sat in front of the table. Swish. The dense wine was poured into a porcelain cup. As soon as the wine entered his stomach, essence energy swept through Bufang's abdomen. Buzz, congratulations to the host for completing the stipulated turnover task. Now, the promotion begins. The serious voice of the system resounded in Bufang's mind. On the eve of Nether Prison's attack on Earth Prison, the long-awaited promotion notification of the system finally resounded in Bufang's mind. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.